Chapter 4171. The two hosts were also kind-hearted. When they saw that the situation wasn't right, they braced themselves and flew up, shouting, "Chinan concedes defeat! Chinan concedes defeat! Concedes defeat! Concedes defeat!" This shout sent the crowd into a frenzy. Nyonyo fearlessly rushed up and blocked Bu Yi with his hand. He straightened his back and stood next to Qian, saying sternly, "You can't move anymore. You can't move anymore. Chinan concedes defeat. Very good. You are the next arena master of our arena number 3. Student Bu Yi from Jiawei Academy has successfully challenged arena number 3 and will inherit the previous arena master's points, 1,200. Congratulations, Student Bu Yi. Congratulations, congratulations. Duo also wiped her sweat and looked at Bu Yi with a slightly horrified expression. She didn't expect this student Bu Yi from Jiawei Academy to be so savage and terrifying despite his fair, delicate, and adorable appearance. Previously, the other person had already admitted defeat, yet he was still unwilling to give up and wanted to step up and break the other person's limbs. Bu Yi giggled and was about to speak when he suddenly sensed something. He abruptly turned his head. At some unknown time, Arbor had already opened his eyes. At this time, the little stoic was coldly looking at this man on arena number 3. Huge waves billowed in the depths of her eyes. She seemed to have seen this person before in her previous life, but her impression was a bit hazy, and she couldn't grasp some important details. She completely couldn't remember where she had seen this person before or what he had done. This made her involuntarily crease her brows slightly. No matter what, this person's aura gave her a gloomy and unbridled feeling. He definitely wasn't a good person. Bu Yi was startled, but then he opened his mouth and laughed, revealing a row of porcelain-white teeth at the little stoic. "What? You want to avenge Chinan?" Bu Yi smiled provocatively. "Then come challenge this arena master." Arbor looked at him icily. This gaze made Bu Yi even more displeased, and he couldn't help but crease his brows. Who was this stoic face looking at? Through his face, his gaze was unfathomable, as if he was looking at an ancient monster or a corpse. Dean Li, who had originally been full of joy and thought that the Jiawei Academy had finally regained its dignity, was now in a daze. At this moment, his face couldn't help but stiffen. He gritted his teeth and said in a low voice, "What is Bai doing? You're courting death." Wasn't that just courting death? He actually invited the young crown princess to challenge him? If this wasn't courting death, then what was? Now, everyone knew that the little crown princess seemed to have endless tricks up her sleeves. Even if she were to consume the elixir of returning elixir and drag it out with others, perhaps not many people would be able to defeat the crown princess before exhausting their own strength. Not wild. Dean Li's expression became even more gloomy and ugly. What he wanted was for Bai to at least enter the top 10. Instead of letting him court death the moment he entered the arena. There were still more than 5 days before he could enter the arena. Actually, the timing wasn't too good. Everyone knew that the earlier one entered the arena, the more exhausted one would be after a few rounds of fighting. As a result, it was impossible for those who were scheming to enter the arena so early, unless they were extremely confident in their own strength. For example, someone like the little crown princess. The little crown princess didn't know that in everyone's eyes, she had the image of someone who possessed a miraculous elixir, had a card up her sleeve, and was exceptionally talented. Chapter 4172. In reality, everyone didn't know that her main objective in going up the arena was, she was too lazy to fight over and over again. It was better if others came knocking on her door or ganged up on her. That way, she could defeat more people in one go and obtain more points than. It was that simple. But now, the little stoic expressionlessly looked at the youth who continued to court death at her in arena number 3 and blinked her large eyes. Duodwa's eyes and ears were everywhere. When she saw the little lady's expression, she immediately blocked in front of her and raised her hand to shout. During the competition, all arena masters who successfully set up their arenas are not allowed to leave their arenas under any circumstances. Arena number 3 and arena number 6, the arena masters will continue to accept challenges from other people. challengers can directly go up on stage and announce their names. Arbor glanced at Bai on arena number 3 and raised her pinky finger to point in the air. You're dead meat. Everyone. Fuck, why did this stoic face look so fierce and adorable? It looked like the stoic never looked at looks when she beat people up. After all, when little ladies saw Bai's delicate and adorable face, they would more or less develop a favorable impression of him. It was naturally much more convenient for good-looking people to roam the pugilistic world. Bai looked at her with a grin and said, Okay, then I'll wait for you to teach me a lesson. In the blink of an eye, a pitch-black color spread across Arbor's eyes. The demonic pitch-black color invaded her eyes, and her entire pupil seemed to be dyed pure black in that instant, as if she was in an icy abyss. Mo Lien was startled, but she immediately stood up and called Jojo. When Arbor heard the call, she turned to look in Prince Mo's direction. She blinked, and her expression gradually returned to normal. Only a pair of large, watery eyes stared unblinkingly at the crown prince, seemingly a bit aggrieved. Mo Lien was alarmed, but she also let out a slight sigh of relief. Just as he was about to fly to his wife's side, he heard Omega Kotoku say coldly, You can call her back for a moment, but can you call her back for a lifetime? Eldest young Sir Chin lightly waved his fan. How strange. Does this little fellow know that person called Bai? As far as I know, this Bai has always been in the Divine Province and has never been to the lower star domain. Eldest young Sir Chin asked with a chuckle, May I know when the little stoic met him? Mo Lien naturally wouldn't satisfy eldest Chin's curiosity, so she merely turned her head and coldly glanced at him. This one isn't wild. It's said that he used to be from the Lu family of Zhangzhou. However, a few years ago he suddenly poisoned his own family and killed everyone in the night before hurriedly fleeing to Jiaowei City. He's doing well in the black market. Eldest young Sir Chin waved his fan and generously shared all the information he knew with everyone. How could this kind of person have any interactions with the little stoic? The little stoic's expression just now was very strange. For a moment, the way he looked at his enemy seemed to be somewhat similar to the way he looked at his second brother. This little thing had a lot of secrets on it. He really couldn't see through it. Students, as long as you're on stage 3, you'll be able to challenge me. You can get a free bottle of spirit restoring elixir. If you succeed in the challenge, you'll get 10 bottles for free. Eldest young Sir Chin wanted to ask more questions, but he heard an icy and crisp voice cut him off. The crowd immediately went into a frenzy. When everyone heard this, they thought, fuck, if you succeed in the challenge, you'll get 10 bottles of spirit restoring elixir worth 20 million spirit coins. Instantly, they all eagerly signed up for the challenge. That's why it was said never to offend a pill alchemist. You'll be out of luck. The 10th watch ended. Chapter 4173. Naturally, being bullied by the little stoic as a target, Bai was so angry that the veins on his forehead bulged. He wished for nothing more than to directly scold her. Fuck, why was this little stoic so hateful? His face, which had always been smiling like a tiger, almost couldn't hold it in. Pill alchemists were amazing. Fuck, pill alchemists were indeed amazing. Look, it was only a few sentences, but they could stir up the wind, clouds, sun and moon. Many people scrambled to curry favor and jumped onto ring number 3 one after another, shouting, Challenge! 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 Challenge my ass! You have to line up for a challenge. Duo and Nyonyo were grinning from ear to ear as they repeatedly said, As expected, everyone's fighting spirit is high. Don't worry, everyone has a share and can fight. Everyone, line up and sign up one by one. Student Bai, you have to be careful. Duo turned around and looked sympathetically at the red-faced Bai. Normally, you'll be challenged consecutively after 10 rounds of ranking matches. Please prepare as soon as possible. Nyonyo also nodded heavily. Be careful, student Bai. Bai's expression was extremely unsightly. Below, Li Xiangbei's expression was even more unsightly. When he looked up and saw Yun Piaomiao's smiling face that deserved a beating, he truly felt that it was extremely irksome. How pitiful! Yun Piaomiao said with a smile, I didn't expect that everyone would line up to beat you up as soon as you stepped onto the stage. Headmaster Li, I sincerely sympathize with you on behalf of all the teachers and students of the academy. Li Xiangbei naturally couldn't keep his old face. It was stretched taut and abnormally frightening. Ha! Headmaster! Elder Ku couldn't resist twitching his mouth. If he were Li Xiangbei, he also wouldn't be able to restrain himself and would probably slap this guy to death. Headmaster Li was still able to keep his composure. Yun Piaomiao flicked the non-existent dust under his clothes and turned his head to snort. Who told him to come looking for trouble all day long? Who else would the headmaster attack if not him? Elder Ku gave him a look that said, if revenge breeds revenge, will there ever be an end to it? At the same time, the people lining up for ring number 3 had already formed a long line at the passageway below the stage. Damn, judging from the situation, could it be that there are about 300 people? Qin Jiu couldn't help but exclaim. Eldest young Sir Qin waved his fan with a smile. Oh my, so pitiful. Nothing good ever comes out of offending that little fellow. Omega Kotoku pursed his lips. On the other hand, Ming Yasi seemed to have thought of something as he silently lowered his brows. Why isn't everyone speaking? Eldest young Sir Qin asked with a wink. Let's continue our previous topic. No one paid any attention to him. Emolien's cold gaze landed on the third ring. She carefully sized up the smiling young man who was gritting his teeth and smiling even in the face of such a predicament. Jiawei City was indeed full of hidden dragons and crouching tigers. The little stoic sat there cross-legged, her pair of beautiful eyes staring fixedly in the direction of platform number 3. What's going on? Who was this person? Where did this strange sense of familiarity come from? Xiao Mu took a deep breath and reflexively pressed down on her head. She knew that there were many things that had been sealed in a corner of her heart. She never wanted to explore them, much less look back at them. She raised her hand and lowered her eyes, gently pressing down on the godly ruins mirror. She felt a slight heat at this spot. Arbor took a deep breath and did her best to calm herself down before calmly lowering her eyes. Chapter 4174. There were many things that she didn't want to investigate, but that didn't mean that she didn't dare. It was just that she didn't want to. Soon, Bai's arena number 3 became lively. More than 300 people lined up neatly below his arena. This situation was truly an unprecedented and spectacular sight. No one really thought of lining up at the back to pick up the leftovers. Everyone scrambled to be first, mainly because they were afraid that they wouldn't be able to get a share of the medicinal elixir if they lined up at the back. Arbor didn't express any opinion about this. She merely waved her fair hand and fished out a chest of spirit-restoring medicinal elixir, telling everyone with facts, don't panic, everyone will have a share, and there will never be any left. Eldest young Sir Qin's eyelids twitched fiercely. Holy shit, this little lady was too ruthless. Directly taking out a chest of spirit-restoring medicinal elixir, how could they endure this? The 7th young lord, Qin Chong, who was sitting at the side, smiled sarcastically and said, how extravagant. If it were me, I would also want to go up and fight. Qin Jiu immediately jumped up. I'll go. 7th Qin's expression turned ugly at once, and he turned back to glare fiercely at Qin Jiu. He reprimanded, why are you joining in the fun? Upon seeing this, Qin Jiu chuckled mischievously and said, of course I also want that bottle of spirit-restoring medicinal elixir. All right. Eldest young Sir Qin chuckled as he smoothed things over. Since little Jiu wants to go, then let him go up and try. Don't tell me you aren't curious about that bottle of spirit-restoring medicinal elixir? 7th Qin snorted and reflexively touched his left arm, gazing coldly at 5th young Sir Qin, who was sitting next to him. Ever since that incident with Feng Mulin, his left arm had been broken by the little lady's ferule, and after returning to the clan, he had been whipped 30 times. Thanks to her, his injuries hadn't completely recovered yet. This little lady was innocent and cute on the outside, but she was a pitch-black mass on the inside. She truly had a rare heartlessness and callousness. The battle on arena number 3 was in full swing, and everyone eagerly leaped over there. because everyone quickly discovered that as long as they could persist for more than a minute on arena number 3, they would receive a bottle of spirit-restoring medicinal elixir. And everyone who took the special spirit-restoring medicinal elixir would discover that their essence, energy, and spirit would recover without restraint. Even though he had used all his strength after the battle with Bu Yi ended and he left the arena, he still found that his spiritual power naturally recovered very quickly within 2 hours. They finally understood why Qi Yinan from the Qi family was getting more and more aggressive. So it was because this spiritual returning elixir had a sustainability. After he told the others about the special effects of the potion, more and more people came to challenge him. Finally, after 6 hours of non-stop battle. No, the medicinal pills that could be used on him were all used up. Therefore, he could only grit his teeth and announce that he was giving up on defending the ring. Li Xiangdong's old face was so dark that it couldn't be looked at. Especially when he turned his head and saw Principal Yun's smiling face, he felt anger rising from his heart. Damn it. When Bu Yi jumped down from the stage, he glanced darkly at the little stoic. At this moment, the stoic face's eyes were wide open, and her gaze was icily fixed on him. Suddenly, he raised his hand and shouted, "Where are the crown princess's personal guards?" Everyone was speechless. The fan in eldest young Sir Qin's hand fell to the ground with a clatter. 7th Qin's expression turned unsightly in a split second. Willful and reckless. Pass down my order. Execute this person. What was arrogance? This was it. Directly giving an order in public under everyone's watchful eyes. Chapter 4175. Was she this terrifying? Everyone was stupefied as they stared incredulously at the little girl in front of them. This sudden change in attitude was truly like flipping through a book. It was completely incomprehensible. Hearing her words, Bu Ye's smiling face finally changed color. In a panic, he ran towards the back of the Saint Auspicious Arena without looking where he was going. At the same time, there were several whooshing sounds in the wind. Countless figures shot up from the seating area and chased after Bu Yi in a hurry. Duo opened her mouth and turned around to meet the male host's eyes. The little stoic's sudden change in mood caught people off guard. Her mood also eased quickly. However, she silently sat back down in a flash, as if she hadn't done anything just now. She silently sat on stage number 6 and lowered her eyes in silence. Just like this, after 6 days of fighting, the final day of the Heavenly Origin ranking competition finally arrived. Regardless of whether they were competitors or spectators, both on and off the stage, the majority of people had extremely comical panda eyes and were mentally exhausted. The deafening cheers on the surrounding stages also became much softer. Wasn't this nonsense? Fuck, why don't you try making a person continuously shout in excitement for 7 days and 7 nights? Can you still live properly? I am Sir Jojo's section break. Go in. After being shoved by someone, Mu Rochuan stumbled into the room and immediately felt like she had nowhere to step. Red and gold curtains were hung in the room, and it was extremely clean. Smoke curled in spirals, and the furnishings were clean. Against the window was a small table made of gold and silk, and a white jade saucer was placed on top of it. The fragrance of tea permeated the air, unable to conceal the flourishing atmosphere in the room. For a moment, Mu Rochuan had a strange feeling that she seemed to be in a dream. Who are you people? As the Mu family's eldest miss, Mu Rochuan naturally had seen the world. She wouldn't be dazzled by this fragrant room, and her mind was clear and calm. However, she was dressed in rags, covered in filth, and her hair was unkempt. Standing in this boudoir and stepping on the thick, furry carpet, she felt like she was standing on the tip of a needle, extremely out of tune with this place. Who was it that brought her here? Mu Rochuan looked up and saw a beautiful yellow-clothed woman walk in. She bowed to her and said with a smile, "Miss Mu, please wait a moment. My master will be here soon." Mu Rochuan stood there, feeling a little uneasy. But when she thought about it again, she realized that she was just a cripple now. Even her beauty was gone. When a person loses everything and has nothing else to lose, why should they be afraid of anything else? So she just stood there in the fragrant room, her eyes downcast, not saying a word. Your temperament is much steadier than before. A faint voice came from behind the gorgeous bead curtain. Hearing this familiar voice, Mu Rochuan instantly raised her head and stared at her with wide eyes in shock. Mother. Mu Rochuan was slightly agitated. His hands, which were hanging by his sides, involuntarily moved a little. Mu Qingya's gaze fell on her and she sized up her daughter. Her gaze was especially indifferent, as if she was looking at an outsider and not her own daughter. Mu Qingya was dressed in a flowery brocade gown, with her hair in a graceful and luxurious Feitian bun. She was exuding a luxurious fragrance, just like a madam of a noble family. Chapter 4176. In comparison, Mu Rochuan, who stood in front of her, was even worse than a child beggar on the side of the road. Looking at the graceful and calm Mu Qingya, Mu Rochuan suddenly felt ashamed of her own inferiority. Her mother, holy and noble, was like the clouds in the sky. She seemed very close to her, but in fact she was thousands of miles away. She was so far away that she couldn't touch her at all. Rochuan. Mu Qingya looked at her dirty appearance and her gaze suddenly fell on her left cheek. What happened to your face? Mu Rochuan raised her hand to touch her face. Scabs had already formed there, leaving behind an ugly centipede-like scar. I destroyed it myself, Mu Rochuan said indifferently. Why? Mu Qingya raised her eyebrows and looked her up and down, as if she was suddenly interested in this daughter of hers. Mother, don't you understand? A beautiful woman who had her cultivation destroyed and both her hands broken. What would happen if she was driven to the branch family? Others won't think highly of me just because I'm the eldest daughter of the main family. On the contrary, they'll do everything they can to humiliate me because of my previous noble status. Only by destroying this face can I continue to live my life with integrity. If she hadn't made the prompt decision to destroy her own face back then, perhaps she would have become a plaything in the hands of the young masters of the branch family. Mother, I didn't expect you to be such a chaste woman, Mu Qingya said indifferently, but her eyes revealed that she couldn't agree with her. Actually, as far as one's life is concerned, those worldly possessions are nothing. Reputation is just an external possession. Rochuan, you've disappointed me too much. To a woman, the body can be an extremely lethal weapon. You can use your beauty and body to do a lot of things, Mu Qingya said calmly. If you were willing to give yourself to a powerful young master when you went to the branch family, you wouldn't be in such a sorry state now. You're useless with a disfigured face and a broken hand. Mu Qingya frowned and criticized mercilessly, although your father broke your hand and threw you out, your hands were still damaged. However, if the injury on my hand had been carefully nursed back to health and treated with medicine, it wouldn't have ended up like this. Your hand is completely crippled. What can you do in the future? Mu Roxian's eyes widened in disbelief as she stared blankly at her mother. At this moment, she felt as if her heart had been shattered into pieces and was being mercilessly stepped on by someone else. She felt as if her heart had been crushed into mud. This was her mother, the mother who gave birth to her and raised her. He kept telling her how a woman should use her body to get what she wanted. Was this the mother that she had always respected? Her generous and magnanimous mother who treated everyone with gentleness and gentleness? Mu Rochuan felt that the woman in front of her was too unfamiliar and terrifying. So, you actually used your body to exchange for your current position and glory in Tianyun? Mu Rochuan instinctively felt sarcastic and couldn't help but laugh out loud. Mu Qingya looked at her daughter coldly. The yellow-clothed woman's expression immediately changed and she shouted angrily, "How dare you? How dare you be so rude to the hall master?" Mu Qingya raised her hand and stopped her from scolding. Chapter 4177. So, you're already aware of my situation? It's all thanks to Mother's blessing. Mu Rochuan said indifferently, even when I was far away in the branch family, I heard that the hall master of the heavenly fortune-flying heavens hall had been painstakingly lurking in the Mu family for many years. Mu Qingya glanced at the yellow-clothed woman and said softly, "Hiu." The yellow-clothed woman immediately walked forward, took out a bottle of medicinal liquid, and handed it to Mu Rochuan. What is this? Mu Rochuan took a step back warily and stared at Mu Qingya. Your meridians are crippled, and you've lost all your cultivation. Mu Qingya's expression was especially cold. Take this medicinal liquid and you can instantly recover from your injuries. If you're lucky, you might even obtain a special ability. Heavenly fortune can make the impossible possible. Mu Qingya said indifferently. It's just that your arms have been broken for almost 3 months. It might be a bit troublesome to treat them in the future. But don't worry, there's always a way. Mu Rochuan chuckled and tightly pursed her lips, tears involuntarily falling. Is that so? I'm flattered that Mother cares for me so much. I just don't know where Mother was and what you were doing in the past 3 months. What were you doing when your daughter was suffering in the Branch family and could only disfigure her face to protect her chastity? Mu Qingya brushed her clothes indifferently and sighed. Rochuan, the one who wants to punish you is your father, Mu Jingfeng. Your father insisted on punishing you for the sake of the crown princess, and Mother couldn't stop him. All right, now that everything is over, you can stay here with peace of mind. Mu Qingya stood up and said, drink the medicinal liquid as soon as possible. It'll be good for you. Since I'm your mother, of course I'm thinking of you in every way. I won't force you, so think carefully whether you want to drink it or not. If you don't drink it, you can still stay here. Who told me to be your mother? Mu Qingya seemed to emit a gentle motherly light as she looked deeply at her. Mu Rochuan felt cold all over and shivered slightly. Since Mother wants me to drink, then I'll drink. Mu Rochuan sneered. In any case, there was nothing left for her to lose in this ruined body of hers. Even if he had to pay back his mother's life, it didn't matter. She took the medicinal liquid from her and drank it in one gulp. Then she frowned slightly. The feeling of consuming this medicinal liquid made her heart skip a beat. It felt like death. Mu Qingya, on the other hand, had been paying attention to her expression. At this moment, she saw a faint black light floating between her eyebrows. He couldn't help but exclaim, "There's already a black crystal prototype? Have you ever taken this medicinal liquid before?" Mu Rochuan's face also turned pale, and her body was on the verge of collapsing. She recalled that when she was in the Sun-Moon Mystery Realm, she had been severely injured and had been struck by lightning. At that time, the sun and moon alternated, and the secret realm was reversed. Someone gave her a scarlet pill to make her submit. She ate it. Now that he thought about it, it turned out that Tian Yun's lackeys were among the group that had gone to the Sun-Moon Mystery Realm back then. Mu Rochuan's expression was very ugly. She originally wanted to nurture this daughter well, but the black crystal was very magical. When she swallowed the medicinal liquid, whoever she swore to would be her master. Chapter 4178. She didn't expect that someone had already taken a fancy to Mu Rochuan's talent. That's right, Mu Qingya thought that even if Mu Rochuan's cultivation was lost, it didn't matter. As long as she was transformed by Tianyun's basic mutated medicinal liquid, her body would recover one day. It would be even better if she could comprehend a special ability at that time. Moreover, with Mu Rochuan, her daughter who was proficient in talismans and spells, she could train more talisman and spell masters for her. Without mystic energy, she naturally couldn't draw high-level talismans, but at least she had a brain. But now it seemed that Mu Rochuan didn't have a brain at all. She had already recognized someone in the organization as her master. It was impossible for her to absorb her into the flying paradise. Damn it. Mu Qingya took a deep breath and looked at Mu Rochuan for a long time with an ambiguous gaze before saying faintly, "Take her away." This daughter was arrogant, conceited, and stupid. How could she have crawled out of her stomach? She had been teaching this daughter carefully all these years, but she didn't expect that she would achieve nothing in the end. Hall Master. A man in black entered the room and cupped his hands to Mu Qingya. "Hongcheng, what's the matter?" Mu Qingya waved her hand and let her take Mu Rochuan away. Now she really didn't have the strength to talk nonsense with this idiot. "Hall Master, the people in the Hidden Moon Hall that you asked me to keep an eye on just used a large number of teleportation talisman arrays. Do you know where they went?" Mu Qingya suppressed the haze in her eyes and said solemnly, "It should be Jiawei City." Lord Jojo was counting mushrooms. Yun Piaomiao stood up and narrowed her eyes at the blue, cloudless sky in the distance. Elder Ku beside her also stood up with a dignified expression. It seems that many people are coming here. The competition was coming to an end. It was less than 2 hours before the end of the competition. So at this moment, everyone seemed to have been injected with chicken blood and were full of vigor. Yelling and shouting were incessant. A group of onlookers jumped up from their seats and there was a bit of chaos below the stage. Everyone had been sitting for so long. Some began to walk around the field, while others wanted to fish in troubled waters and squeeze to the front. Just as everyone was laughing and joking while watching the competition, a strange and sharp whistling sound came from afar from the horizon. Ordinary people didn't know what was going on, but the cultivators all looked solemn. Some cautious people had already begun to be on full alert. Ho-ho! The giant wings flapped its giant wings, creating a dull wind sound. The people sitting in the front row, the bird's name Joey, what's that? Is that a bird? Or a monster? They saw a giant 9-headed bird dragging hundreds of carriages, flying towards them at a rapid speed, blotting out the sun. People A's group. Right, Esnyonyo Duo, who didn't know what was going on, appeared beside them out of thin air and said with a smile, Student Emo Lien from the Royal Academy, do you want to challenge Student Arbor? Emo Lien glanced at them in annoyance, grabbed Arbor's hand, pulled him behind her, and said in a deep voice, Enemy attack, disperse. Chapter 4179. As they spoke, the strange 9-headed bird had already descended above their heads. It flapped its huge wings, and its pair of sinister little eyes flashed with an incomparably vicious light. Arbor was shielded behind Emo Lien, and only her pair of cold eyes stared at the strange 9-headed bird above them. This fellow was extremely large. When it flapped its wings, it created a gust of wind that was like a whirlpool, blowing the people below off their feet. The onlookers all cried out in panic and scrambled toward the entrance of the passageway. For a moment, the field was in chaos. Many people were trampled, and cries of alarm could be heard from time to time. The strange 9-headed bird above them suddenly screeched. That sharp sound instantly caused many people's heads to buzz, and they spat out blood. From the hundreds of carriages that it was dragging, many corpse puppets with stiff bodies and strange faces suddenly drilled out. One by one, they stood there in the air, causing people's hair to stand on end. The strange 9-headed bird once again let out a long screech. As if they had received an order, those corpse puppets suddenly opened their eyes and moved their feet. It was as if they were following an invisible long staircase, descending from the sky. There was not a trace of white in the depths of their jet-black eyes. High-level corpse puppets. Arbor lowered her hand slightly, and a pitch-black crow repeating crossbow poked out from under her sleeve. Ah! Strange roars filled the entire battlefield. Densely packed corpse puppets flew down from the sky, each holding an iron rod in their hands. They swung it at anyone they saw, and their eyes were filled with viciousness. The ordinary people were immediately scared out of their wits, and they all scattered and fled. Arbor's eyes focused, and she sternly said, Everyone stop. Don't run around carelessly. Dozens of jade talismans flew out from her fingertips, circling around the dozens of onlookers nearby and covering them. The jade talismans flickered, and a defensive wall instantly appeared in front of them. A young scholar who was closest to the wall could only watch as a pale-faced corpse puppet with scarlet eyes jumped onto the defensive wall and swiped its claw across the transparent wall. For a moment, the young scholar's heart almost jumped out of his chest. Then, he saw that the ferocious corpse puppet was struck by a blue light and shattered in front of him. Everyone, wear a protective suit. Don't get scratched by this thing. Emo Lien calmly instructed. Behind him stood several hundred black-clothed youths. Hearing this, they had already taken out protective clothing from their inner worlds at the fastest speed and put it on neatly. They said in unison, Yes. Arbor flipped the talismans in his hand, and countless jade talismans flew out like a gust of wind. One by one, they built a square and indestructible defense under the viewing platform. The panicked commoners who did not know where to go were naturally anxious and rushed into the defensive wall one by one. The purple forest guards sprang into action, each of them wielding a specially modified repeating crossbow as they fired at the approaching corpse puppets. The sound of gravel rolling could be heard in the air. Suddenly, huge rocks were thrown down by the harpies, crashing into the crowd. The commoners behind the defensive wall were better off. Their faces were pale, and they huddled together in fear. The moment the rocks fell, they were destroyed by a layer of blue light on the defensive wall. As for the people who were running toward the defensive wall, some were directly smashed into meat paste by the rocks falling from the sky. Some of them were smashed head-on under the rocks. Their legs trembled a few times outside the rocks, and then they stopped breathing. Chapter 4180. More corpse puppets leapt forward, grabbing people and biting them without regard for anything else. Anyone that was bitten by them would gradually turn into a corpse in just 15 minutes. Their entire body started to tremble numbly and stiffly as they quickly joined the corpse puppet army. This way, the corpse puppet army would definitely expand and become more and more spectacular. There were many living people here, and it was definitely an excellent place to turn corpses. Arbor's expression was grave as he looked in front of him. Situ Yi, Liang Qingqing, and the others had already joined the battle with a group of fire-smelting city and ice-sealed city disciples. They waved the sharp blades in their hands and quickly pierced the crystal cores in the heads of the corpse puppets. The nine-headed strange bird that was flapping its wings gave off another shrill shriek. All the corpse puppets seemed to be guided by something and instantly surrounded the crowd as though they had been injected with chicken blood. They surrounded the defensive wall and slammed heavily against it. The normal people hiding behind the defensive wall were almost scared out of their wits at this time. They kept praying inside, hoping that this transparent defensive wall could hold on a bit and not be torn apart by the corpse puppets. Otherwise, the people inside would all be finished. As the sounds of fighting rose everywhere, people continuously picked up the weapons on the ground and fought with their lives on the line against the corpse puppets. Arbor shot out a few black gold arrows and killed a few high-level corpse puppets that were approaching. His face was filled with silence. In such a chaotic scene, those with high cultivation couldn't do anything at all. If they activated the absolute kill formation and attacked indiscriminately, the innocent bystanders below would definitely be caught in the crossfire. Mo Lien naturally thought of this as well, so she couldn't tell him to activate the holy fire to burn this place. They could only move towards the densest part of the corpse crowd and do their best to keep the power of the five spirits within a certain range so as not to implicate anyone else. At this time, the nine-headed strange bird gave off a strange shriek. Arbor raised his head and saw Duan Muqing and Mu Xingchen fly into the air with many xiuzhe and fight fiercely with the nine-headed strange bird. That strange bird had 9 heads and 18 pairs of small eyes. Its head could turn 360 degrees and had no blind spots. It could clearly see every xiuzhe fighting against it. With a shake of its body, it raised its head and howled. The ear-piercing sound instantly killed several practitioners with low cultivation. Mu Xingchen's expression darkened, and the flying sword in his hand flew out with a whoosh, aiming for the strange bird's neck. Only a dang sound was heard. Everyone's heart skipped a beat. This strange bird had a copper head and iron arms, and it didn't have a single weakness? Roar! Hundreds of harpies flew back and forth in the air, charging to the side of the strange nine-headed bird and guarding it like guards. Is this bird a nightcaw bird? Mo Lien held his wife's hand tightly and nodded with a solemn expression. However, it should have been greatly modified. This body is probably comparable to a holy beast. You stay here. I'll go meet him. Mu Xingchen and the others were no match for it. Mo Lien felt uneasy and held Arbor's hand. Arbor blinked slightly and raised his hand to hold his right hand. Be careful. Mo Lien nodded. A moon-white figure flew up and landed in front of the strange nine-headed bird. When he turned his head, he saw young Master Omega Kotoku had also flown up. At this time, he was silently standing beside him and coldly glancing at him. His eyes were extremely deep, as if they were filled with ice that would not melt for thousands of years. Chapter 4181. Mo Lien only glanced at him, frowned, and retracted her gaze. She carefully sized up the 9-headed bird in front of her. Among its 9 heads, only the one in the middle looked the most normal. Looking at the 8 heads, the closer they were to the side, the narrower they became. The 2 heads on the left and right were only slightly larger than an adult's fist. Their facial features were strangely squeezed together, like a sarcoma that had been cut several times. Black moon flashed in her hand, and a black flame climbed up. Without saying anything, it chopped towards the 9-headed bird's head. The strange bird let out an extremely unpleasant shriek, and its 2 sharp claws slapped. Although its body was excessively large, its speed wasn't weak. In an instant, it dodged the strange light shot by Black Moon, and at the same time, tore an ordinary cultivator with wide eyes and open mouth to pieces. Looking at the bloody scene in front of them, those hot-headed people who followed Mu Xingchen and Duan Muqing to fight the strange bird in the sky suddenly felt like a bucket of cold water had been poured over their heads. They were so frightened that they couldn't help but tremble. The strange bird flapped its wings, and suddenly let out another shriek. Mo Lian's eyes darkened. Block your 5 senses. This shriek was definitely poisonous. It was clearly a different kind of sound wave attack that could destroy a cultivator's divine sense. Second young master leaped forward, stabbing the strange bird's claws with his sword. Suddenly, he turned around and retreated, withdrawing his sword. The place where he originally stood was suddenly attacked by countless flames. Second young master. The Qin family members cried out. Saintus! Several calls from afar reached Arbor's ears. Arbor, who was rapidly arranging defensive array glyphs, turned her head and saw Feng Zhangqing rushing over with several hundred disciples. Feng Zhangfei's handsome face was sullen as he followed behind his big brother. He glanced at her, wanting to say something but hesitated. Arbor didn't talk nonsense with them and didn't bother to correct them for calling her Saintess. She only said in a low voice, "Save people." Feng Zhangqing nodded and was about to leave with his clansmen. Arbor suddenly took out several dozen sets of protective clothing from her inner world and threw them over along with a handful of talismans. Be careful. Feng Zhangqing's eyes flashed with a smile. He raised his hand and pulled his younger brother, who snorted from his nose, and hurriedly ran toward the crowd. Although Feng Zhangfei was grumbling, Elder is really meddlesome, forcing us to secretly protect him. What can happen to this stoic face? His hands, however, did not stop following his big brother's movements, clearing out all the nearby zombies as if he was chopping vegetables and melons. He protected some of the pale-faced commoners and retreated. When Mu Xingchen and the others saw that Mo Lian had come over and was able to deal with the strange 9-headed bird, they immediately heaved a sigh of relief. They hurriedly turned around and called out to Little Fatty and the others, running over to fight the harpies. These harpies hung above everyone's heads like shit. Although they did not have the power of the 5 spirits, they would still throw some stones from the surroundings of the venue. It was not harmful to the Xiuzhe, but it would harm the ordinary spectators below. Gongzi Omega Kotoku coldly looked in Mo Lian's direction and suddenly raised his hand to block Qin Jiao and the others who were about to rush forward. Let's take a look first. Qin Jiao was taken aback. Second brother, we should hurry up and help Prince Mo. If Duan Yu was here, he definitely wouldn't hesitate like he was now. He would have helped Prince Mo fight this strange 9-headed bird in the morning. Qin Jiao thought, but he didn't dare to refute the second young master due to his accumulated power. Mo Lian doesn't need anyone's help. Chapter 4182. As he spoke, a faint cold glint flitted through his eyes. Mo Lian was such a proud person. Wouldn't helping him be an insult to him? Qin Xian's eyes were cold and indifferent. He lowered his eyes and took a step back while floating in the air. Behind him, Qin Jiao and the other Qin family disciples naturally followed suit and took a step back. It wasn't that Mo Lian didn't hear Qin Xian's words. He just didn't want to respond. He flew straight up with his sword and faced the strange 9-headed bird. As soon as the strange bird opened its mouth, a foul and sour smell naturally assaulted their nostrils. Mo Lian held his breath and threw out several streaks of black fire, all of which were aimed at the bird's middle head. After several pop-pop sounds, the The strange bird immediately let out several unpleasant screeches. It shook its head and flapped its enormous wings, directly swatting at Emolien's head. Countless sparks slowly rose around it. Seeing the strange bird chase after him, Emolien's eyes darkened, and he raised his sleeve. Suddenly, with a few pop-pop sounds, the fire seeds that were originally floating around the strange bird like sparks exploded in the air, spewing out gorgeous black-purple flames that intertwined and entwined around the strange bird. Emolien wielded his sword in his left hand, while his right hand conjured up a fiery wind. The instant he transformed, a giant crimson dragon phantom opened its mouth, its whiskers billowing upwards. The dragon's eyes bulged as it chomped down on one of the 9-headed strange bird's heads. "Second brother, over there." Before Qinjiao could finish speaking, he felt someone shove him. He turned around and saw Qin Chi smiling coldly at him. "We're not on the same side to begin with. Why are you in such a hurry?" Omega Kotoku naturally saw it. In fact, from where they were, they just happened to be able to see a disheveled human head appear on the back of the strange 9-headed bird. That person held a large black bow in his hand, and in the blink of an eye, 3 black arrows as thick as an arm pierced through the air with a terrifying gust of air, stabbing towards Emolien's body. Soul-chasing arrows. Qin Jiao's expression abruptly changed as he blurted out. As the name implied, the soul-chasing arrow was an arrow that shot at a person's soul, causing the person to die and the Tao to disappear. If an ordinary person was hit by this soul-chasing arrow, they would be completely gone. If a powerful cultivator was unlucky enough to be hit by this arrow, they could still save a little if they could find a godly doctor within 3 days. However, if they were saved, they would lose all their cultivation and become a cripple from then on. This strange bird really had a vicious mind. Who would have thought that after fighting for so long, it actually had something hidden on its back that could shoot arrows? Emolien was now floating in the air, her left hand holding the sword to cut down the fireball that the 9-headed bird shot out. Her right hand was controlling the fire dragon to strike the bird's head. Seeing that the 3 soul-chasing arrows were already in front of him, there was no way to dodge. A flash of red suddenly appeared beside him and yanked his arm. Countless vines weaved into a net with a wave of his hand, catching the 3 soul-chasing arrows that were flying at high speed. The soul-chasing arrow was trapped in the net. It shook a few times before it broke free from the huge net and shot towards the moon. However, the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal had already pulled Emolien and retreated to the side in a flash. However, these 3 soul-chasing arrows continued to stare at their target, Emolien, relentlessly. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal's eyes darkened. With a wave of his hand, hundreds of wooden vines flew towards the strange 9-headed bird. In a matter of minutes, it was encased in a huge cocoon. Emolien moved forward in a flash. Black Moon flew out of her hand and rapidly pierced into the middle head of the strange 9-headed bird like a shooting star. The strange bird let out a mournful shriek. One of its eyeballs fell out and landed with a thud. Chapter 4183. At the same time, a terrifying scream came from above the bird's back. It turned out that Holy Sun Miyen had seized the opportunity to stab the person who was lying dormant on the bird's back and attacking Emolien. That person suddenly rolled down from the bird's back and was beheaded by Holy Sun Miyen with 2 swords. When they looked back, they saw the 3 soul-chasing arrows chasing after the crown prince as if they had been injected with chicken blood. Prince Mo was expressionless. Several black flames sprang out from his fingers and suddenly wrapped around the 3 soul-chasing arrows. Young Master Omega Kotoku looked at the Crown Prince coldly. The 3 soul-chasing arrows were wrapped by the Crown Prince's black flames and melted into a black liquid in a matter of minutes. Divine Weapon Master. Everyone was shocked. Those who understood could not help but open their mouths wide. These 3 soul-chasing arrows were definitely not ordinary items. Prince Mo could melt them in such a short time with only 1 hand of black flames. It was clear to see just how powerful the Tao of artifact forging was. Any weapon with spirit that dared to offend him was simply courting death. However, with a swipe of his hand, Emolien collected that melted liquid into a bottle. At the same time, the nine-headed strange bird roared and broke free from its restraints. But soon, under the joint efforts of Holy Sun Mi Yen and the Venerable Peach Blossom Immortal, the strange bird was entangled by a layer of water spirit wall and a wood spirit wall. Mo Lien flew straight up and raised Raven Moon in her hand. At the speed of light, she cut off half of one of the nine-headed strange bird's heads. The strange bird was in pain and let out a mournful and ghostly scream. Its sharp and strange voice instantly made the practitioners who were fighting with the corpse puppets dizzy. The strange bird immediately dragged its huge wings and turned around. It left everyone behind and hurriedly escaped from this place. The broken carriage frame immediately fell from the sky. From time to time, there were solid pieces of wood that fell into the crowd. Everyone dodged and looked up to see the strange bird escape. A large number of harpies also seemed to turn and flee in panic under the strange bird's shrill cry. A sense of relief rose in their hearts and they heaved a long sigh of relief. Finally, these things were driven away. However, Mo Lien and Arbor's expressions were not relaxed at all. Their faces were heavy. The things that Tian Yun could bring out seemed to be getting stronger and stronger. In the future, what kind of good days would the people have? Although the remaining corpse puppets had all been taken care of, the corpse puppets were still alive. However, the people from Arbor were not relaxed at all. After all, it was hard to say whether the injured people would be infected on a large scale. A good heavenly yuan competition had ended in such a way. Everyone couldn't help but sigh. Mo Lien turned around to look only to see that second Qin, who had originally been standing there, had already left. Eldest young Master Qin was leading a few juniors of the Qin estate to help treat the crowd. "What are you looking at?" The little stoic tugged at his sleeve. Mo Lien shook his head. He was thinking about how much Omega Kotoku wanted him dead. But did he think that as long as he died, he would be able to mend his relationship with Jojo? What kind of sweet dreams were they having? Even if he was no longer around, wasn't there still Duanyu? When was it his turn to take care of Jojo? Abba. Why was he assimilated with Jojo? No matter who he met, he always liked to use Duanyu as a comparison. When the two of them exited the holy auspicious arena, they saw a scene of devastation. The streets were filled with rampaging corpse puppets and the figures of the city guard hunting and killing. The two of them looked at each other. Chapter 4184. Their moods were naturally heavy. They didn't expect that Jiaowei City would be the first place to be attacked by the corpse puppet army and cause serious damage. Previously, they had only attacked small villages on the outskirts of Li City and Song State's Eagle City's Little Li Town. The crowd definitely wouldn't be as dense as Jiaowei City. So Tian Yun's actions have begun to escalate? Quick, catch him. Don't let him escape. After an angry shout, several people wearing the city lord's guard uniform quickly rush in their direction. How could the stumbling woman who was running at the front with two half-grown children in her hands outrun those ferocious guards behind her? One of the guards raises the broadsword in his hand and slashes at the woman's head without a care. Mo Lien flicks her finger and a gust of wind flies out, directly breaking the blade. Half of the blade bounces off with a clang and is stuck in the wall at an angle. The expressions of the guards suddenly change. They turn to look at the blade stuck in the wall, then turn back to look at the handsome man in the school uniform, who is as clean as the wind. They uniformly take 2 steps back. The stone bricks on the wall are very thick, they are very clear. If one's cultivation isn't high, how can one flick the blade into the wall? The woman hurriedly grabs the 2 children and scrambles behind Mo Lien and Arbor, begging for mercy. "Young master, young miss, please save us, save us." "What are you doing?" Arbor's cold eyes look at the burly men in front of him. Since when can ordinary people be killed wantonly in this city? There are always some animals who take advantage of the chaos to make a fortune. Are these people guards or robbers? The leader of the guards still politely salutes them with cupped hands. This woman has traces of being bitten by a corpse puppet. "We are following orders." "Oh no." The woman screams in horror. She doesn't care if they are in public and directly pulls up her sleeves to show Arbor, "Young miss, young master, they are wrongly accusing me. I have never been bitten by a corpse puppet. These people broke into my house, killed people for money, murdered my brother and sister-in-law, and even attacked my 2 nephews. Therefore, the most chaotic thing was still the human heart. Arber's eyes coldly swept over those people, and the corners of his mouth curled up in a cold arc. Kill them. Miss, what are you doing? The leader of the guards finally panicked slightly when he saw several black-clothed youths with extraordinary skills surrounding him from all directions. We're just doing our job. Anyone bitten by a zombie will quickly turn into a zombie. A vine whip whipped the man heavily against the wall. Arber pursed his lips and looked at him coldly. When the man got up, he lashed out with his whip again. After 7 or 8 lashes, the guards were so scared that they were trembling all over. They knelt on the ground and kowtowed repeatedly. This woman and those 2 children didn't have the slightest bit of corpse chi on them. These guards actually dared to make a move on the lion's head and swindle her, Xiaomu. It was simply laughable. Jiaowei City is going to fall into chaos. Emolian raised her head slightly and looked at the dark sky. In the evening, the entire Jiaowei City was shrouded in rain and fog. Everyone gathered in the city lord's residence and could clearly hear the chaotic roars of the corpses. The city lord fled with his family. Chapter 4185. This son of a bitch. The bad-tempered instructor Broad Axe slammed his fist on the desk, his expression extremely unsightly. Just now, they received news that Jiaowei Academy had also been attacked by zombies and suffered disastrous casualties. Many students were also injured, and they didn't know if they would mutate in the future. The city was currently in chaos, and everyone could only retreat to the city lord's estate to discuss a countermeasure. Everyone, the current situation is not optimistic at all. We plan to withdraw from Jiaowei City for the time being, said Instructor He-Wei of the City of Shadows. If we leave now, what about the citizens of the city? Someone immediately questioned. If we don't leave, what can we do if we stay here? He-Wei lowered his eyes and said very calmly, do you still not understand? Tianyun came prepared this time. He clearly wants to occupy Jiaowei City. Arber glanced at this instructor from the City of Shadows and nodded in his mind. He was a sensible person. Tianyun's move was to occupy Jiaowei City as a stronghold. They planned to bring everything to the table and deal with it. Mu Xiaoxue said softly, I think we should help them as much as possible and take away all the citizens that we can. For example, the several hundred people hiding in the city lord's estate. We naturally have to help them if we can. Hearing this, Liang Qingqing glanced at her and sneered, how do you know if anyone has been bitten inside? What if they mutate midway back? Do you have the corresponding protective measures? She had always been straightforward and said whatever was on her mind. But this impetuous tone was grating to the ears of Zhao Yi and Guishuan, who were eager to protect her. Zhao Yi slapped the table and said angrily, how can you say that? Little junior sister is just being kind. Liang Qingqing was also a bit angry. No matter how she heard it, she felt that this man calling Mu Xiaoxue little junior sister was irritating. Her stoic little junior sister was still cute. Why did this little junior sister of the City of Shadows look so vexing? City Yi hastily stopped Liang Qingqing and said aloofly, it's not that we don't want to help others, but we have to take care of our own people before helping others. Although the little stoic didn't utter a word, her eyes expressed her agreement. Mu Xiaoxue hurriedly stopped Zhao Yi and nodded at City. This young master is right, Xiaoxue also has the same thoughts. Since that's the case, let's discuss how to save them. The fire-smelting city's city lord lifted his sleeves and sat down. He glanced at the icebound city's city lord beside him. Which area does icebound city plan to go to? Everyone had long been accustomed to the discord between the 2 city lords, so they didn't find it strange. They all gathered together and looked at the city map on the table. Jiaowei City was a very large city, and its population was very scattered. These academies, from teachers to students, added up to less than 7,000 people. They could only do their best. They would save as many as they could. Once they left the city, this place would quickly become a gathering place for corpse puppets. Tianyun also had his own considerations when choosing the location. For example, Jiaowei City was a lawless area that didn't belong to the 3 states and had nothing to do with the 4 major cities. It was already benevolent of them to lend a helping hand. What do the 2 crown princes think? Mu Xiaoxue asked softly. Everyone's gazes landed on Mo Lian and Ming Yasi. Akir glared fiercely at Mu Xiaoxue. Chapter 4186. What do you want to say? You want our Ming province to take in those filthy and useless people? Akir haughtily lifted her chin and coldly swept a glance at Mu Xiaoxue. If you want to be a saint, you should take these people back to your city of shadows. In any case, your city of shadows is comparable to Ming province's capital, so it can definitely accommodate these people. Mu Xiaoxue's small face paled slightly, as though she didn't expect this Ming province girl to be so shrewd, mocking her as a saint. As soon as she opened her mouth, Liang Qingqing curled her lips in amusement and flashed to the little stoic side. Little junior sister, let's go out for a walk. The atmosphere was so foul that she could feel a gloomy atmosphere even if she stayed in the room. She didn't want her little junior sister to suffocate. The little stoic nodded. When the 2 walked out hand in hand, they happened to see a group of people walking into the city lord's estate's main hall. When the leader saw her, he immediately gave her a dirty look. He didn't even look at her and directly led the group of people to walk past her. Liang Qingqing immediately knitted her brows and turned to glance at that haughty girl. This girl looked to be 18 years old. She was pretty and beautiful, and her lips were gorgeous. However, her chin was slightly sharp and narrow, giving her entire face a bit of sharpness. Who is it? Liang Qingqing asked in a low voice. Someone on the other side had already announced clearly, Medicine King Island's Miss Ni Hanji has arrived. Liang Qingqing couldn't resist rolling her eyes as she watched the 2 rows of Medicine King Island's guards clear the way and escort the girl to the table. You know her? Liang Qingqing pulled the little stoic out the door. Arbor nodded. I've seen her a few times. Medicine King Island's island master's daughter? She's a high consecrator's disciple. Fuck, I thought she was the future island master. Wasn't she just a consecrator's disciple? What a grand show of extravagance. It really scared Qingqing to death. After the 2 of them left, they naturally didn't pay attention to Ni Hanji's movements. Ni Hanji walked in front of everyone and said aloofly, Medicine King Island learned that something happened in Jiaowei City and sent us to help. Ni Hanji had originally followed the Lin family to join in the fun. Previously, she had been arrested along with Lin Myoer and Gu Isin to the capital's prison. Fortunately, the Lin family and the Medicine King Island had worked together to mediate, and she had finally been released from prison. In order to make amends, the Lin family naturally granted her every request. He thought that Ni Hanji was in a bad mood, so he accompanied her to Jiaowei City to watch the competition and relax. Who would have thought that they would encounter such a thing? Originally, Ni Hanji didn't want to get involved in the muddy waters of Jiaowei City. It was just that he had received a message from the island master not long ago, so he reluctantly accepted it. The Medicine King's Island is a place of benevolence and care for the poor commoners. Ni Hanji said with an indifferent expression. This time, Jiaowei City has met with a great disaster, and the commoners are suffering. If they need any elixirs, medicinal liquids, and the like, Medicine King Island can give everyone a 30% discount and sell them cheaply. Everyone could not help but look at each other. Isn't this Miss Ni of Medicine King Island a bit too strange? Those medicinal pills and medicinal liquids were easily worth thousands of gold. Ordinary commoners, even if you gave them a 50% discount, they wouldn't be able to afford them, right? Isn't he supposed to be benevolent and caring for the world? Why do they still need money? Everyone was a bit confused. Ni Hanji swept a disdainful glance at them. What's with your expressions? Are there any pharmacists among you with special abilities? Step forward, Ni Hanji said impatiently. Chapter 4187. According to our Medicine King Island's research over the past few days, Ni Hanji sat down at the table and said indifferently, high-level apothecaries can suppress corpse poison. Her gaze swept over everyone's faces. The higher the level of the apothecary, the richer the medicinal effects. If the apothecary gives himself medicinal effects in advance, he can prevent corpse poison for a certain period of time. Our Medicine King Island has 2 golden-level apothecaries, but unfortunately, they are not here at the moment. Enai Hanji's expression was haughty as her gaze swept over Mo Lien's group, who had turned to leave without a word. Her gaze instantly turned furious. Stop right there. The 2 rows of Medicine King Island guards immediately drew their sabers and blocked the path of Mo Lien's group. Mo Lien looked back and sneered, spitting out 2 words from between her teeth. You want to? The Medicine King Island guards blocking her path were clearly intimidated by her aura. Their hands trembled, and they almost lost their grip on their sabers. They hastily retreated a few steps uneasily. Enai Hanji slammed the table and stood up, reprimanding angrily, "Look at you motley crew, what can you do for the citizens of the city?" Our Medicine King Island has stepped forward without hesitation to lead this battle against Heavenly Providence, but you are not cooperating at all. Enai Hanji said angrily. Don't think that just because of your noble status, Ming Yasi left with his group without another word and waved his hand in passing. We will head to the eastern region from the Underworld province. We from the Divine Prefecture will head to the western region. Eldest young Master Qin chuckled as he fanned himself and led the Qin Estates group outside. Enai Hanji suddenly felt that her face was getting more and more embarrassed. She almost couldn't breathe because of the anger in her chest. Akir couldn't help but snicker. Look, you think you're infallible, using Medicine King Island's chicken feather as a token of authority. Do you really think you can ride over the 3 provinces? To put it bluntly, Medicine King Island was a desolate island reclusive from the world. It had nothing to do with the 3 provinces. And you want to use Medicine King Island's name to command them? Songzhou's Huiyu Academy, Underworld Continent's Tianhua Academy, and the people from the 4 major cities all stood up and followed out. They couldn't be bothered with Enai Hanji, who was talking to herself. Where did this lunatic come from? The moment he came in, he wanted to give orders to all of them. If you don't know how to speak properly, then scram. Miss, what should we do now? A little maidservant with a round face hesitantly took a step forward and asked in a mosquito-like voice. Enai Hanji clenched her teeth and slammed the table. Corpse puppets are everywhere in the city. It's hard to move around. Without a doctor to help them, let's see what they can do. Enai Hanji couldn't help but grit her teeth when she thought of the Crown Prince's icy gaze when he turned back to look at her. She thought of the Crown Prince's mocking gaze when he looked at her. These people did not put her in their eyes. Soon, they would know how to write the word death. At that time, she would make them all beg her. Arbor tugged at Mo Lien's sleeve, and the latter naturally looked down at him, amused by the little fellow's curious baby face. What is it? What did that woman say just now? When she and senior sister Liang were chatting outside the door, they couldn't help but be curious when they saw Ming Yasi and the others storming out. Just a woman who thinks she's infallible, Mo Lien said indifferently. Lu Yu and the others followed behind Prince Mo and couldn't help but laugh when they heard this. Miss Enai was giving orders just now, but unfortunately, no one was willing to pay attention to her. Chapter 4188. Arbor uttered an "oh" and didn't say anything else. Why was it that every time they chatted, they would kill the conversation? Everyone couldn't help but twitch their mouths. They couldn't resist sizing her up and shaking their heads as they snickered inwardly. The little stoic didn't seem to be interested in what was happening in the room at all. She was actually just casually asking the group headed to the western part of the city. While they were cleaning up the zombies, they also rescued some commoners who had been surrounded by zombies. Arbor and the people from the Qin estate helped to check if they had been poisoned by zombie poison. While they were busy, they heard a commotion ahead. Oh no, a zombie has scratched several people. It's charging toward us. Following the frantic shouts, the crowd that had already stabilized started to flee in a panic again. Don't run around recklessly. Qin Jiao yelled anxiously. Hey you guys. However, who could clearly hear what the others were saying at this critical moment? Everyone was fleeing for their lives out of instinct. Duanmu Qing drew his sword to meet the zombie baring its fangs and brandishing its claws, chopping off one of its tentacles. This thing was neither human nor beast. Its arm was like an octopus with countless soft tentacles extending from it. It was truly frightening to look at. This is an advanced level rank 3 zombie. On the side, Lu Yu said gravely, "Be careful that its tentacles will separate." Before she could finish speaking, that zombie's 2 tentacles flew out with a whoosh and whipped directly at the long sword in Duan Muqing's hand. Duan Muqing was alarmed, and he spun around to retreat 2 steps. A spirit fire burned over and enveloped that tentacle. However, that thing was very tenacious and only burned to ashes after jumping a few times in the fire. The zombie was extremely vexed after suffering 2 losses in a row. Advanced level rank 3 zombies like this had developed intelligence and were very vengeful. Immediately, as if it had locked onto Duan Muqing, it whipped out several tentacles and swiftly crawled toward him. "Be careful!" Xiao Mu shouted from afar, whipping out a vine with a flick of her hand. However, a hole suddenly split open on that tentacle zombie's chest, and a scarlet-eyed zombie chick burrowed out. Without any explanation, he bit onto Duan Muqing's left wrist. Qi Xianxian cried out in surprise. Before she could rush forward, she saw Duan Muqing lift up the corpse puppet bird with his sword and slash it into meat paste with a few slashes. Little Fatty quickly ran to his side and pulled his hand to take a look. His eyes turned red with anxiety. "Broken wood. I'm fine." Mo Lien and He-Chun rushed over when they heard the news. They immediately stopped the high-level zombie with 17 to 18 tentacles. One of them used a wooden cage to imprison it. The other person's black flames spread and burned. The high-level zombie puppet roared twice at first, but gradually it was roasted into a puddle of corpse water by the black fire. Before it died, its small eyes emitted a very human-like look of fear. Looking at Mo Lien and Ma Shichun's expressions, it was as if they had seen a ghost. It was truly hilarious. He was the one who looked like a ghost, but he saw others as ghosts. The exhausted commoners collapsed to the ground one after another. Some covered their faces and cried, some hugged their heads and cried bitterly. All of them were at a loss of what to do. They only felt that their future was boundless and they didn't know where they would end up. "Duan Muqing!" Arbor dashed over and grabbed his wrist. He lowered his head and saw that the little zombie chick had bitten 2 black bloody holes in his hand. The skin around the holes was already rotting. "It's fine." Duan Muqing shook his head. Just now, he had already used the medicinal power to control this layer of corpse energy and confined it to his wrist. Chapter 4189. He took out his sword, but Arbor grabbed his hand and shouted angrily, "What are you doing?" Duan Muqing was a bit stupefied by her berating, and he muttered, just chop off his wrist, heh." Arbor snorted. "You're a brave man who severed his wrist, not distressed at all." Qi Xianxian wiped her tears on the side. "Big brother Duanmu, how about we think of another way?" Xiao Mu was burning with rage, and she burned the small zombie puppet bird that Duan Muqing had already chopped into several pieces into ashes. This hateful zombie bird. She couldn't help but recall how she was bitten by the zombie that brat Yu Hui at Qian Luo's underground fighting arena. The ones that bit her were precisely this kind of seemingly harmless small zombie bird. They always liked to hide behind or inside large zombie puppets and deliver a fatal blow at any time. Duan Muqing glanced at her helplessly and said softly, "Jojo, if I use medicinal power to control this zombie poison, I have to replenish it every 2 days. Otherwise, it will spread to my arm again. Who knows if one day my medicinal power won't be able to keep up and he might as well sever his wrist cleanly." Duan Muqing wasn't someone who liked to be a burden to others. In any case, it was his left wrist that was bitten, so it wouldn't affect him holding a sword normally. Even if it was his right wrist that was bitten today, at worst, he could just start practicing using his left hand again. "Shut up." The little stoic berated him angrily and abruptly pressed a handful of ointment onto his wound, crushing it fiercely with her small hand. It hurt so much that Duan Muqing's handsome face twitched slightly, but he endured it and didn't make a sound. Jojo. Qi Xianxian was a bit alarmed and poked the back of her hand. The little stoic's expression was unsightly, and the icy glint in her eyes could freeze Duanmu Qing into pieces. This person usually didn't speak much, but he didn't seem to care about his body at all when he made a decision. Hey, he's really decisive. Sever his wrist? He was probably still thinking that it was fortunate that it wasn't his right wrist that was severed. She really wanted to beat him to death. Mo Lien walked over and patted Duanmu Qing's shoulder. She pulled his hand over and naturally infused the medicinal effects into his body. Duanmu Qing's eyes suddenly flickered. He looked at the crown prince in surprise and said softly, "God tier? God-level pharmacist." He could sense that the medicinal power coming from the crown prince was at least a stage higher than his own. If he was a heaven-grade alchemist, then the crown prince was at least a divine-grade alchemist. He was indeed very strong. As Duanmu Qing thought to himself, a sense of reverence for a high-level pharmacist rose in his heart. All right, keep it under control for now. Jojo will think of something. Mo Lien glanced at him and tugged on the little girl's cold hand. He patted her head to comfort her. Jojo, it's okay now. Ha! A mocking laugh came from outside the crowd. She saw 2 rows of guards from Medicine King Island, escorting Ni Hanji over like stars surrounding the moon. Miss Ni's expression turned ugly when she saw the crown prince. The moment she spoke, she questioned loudly, "So you two are both pharmacists? Then why didn't you say anything when I asked at the city lord's estate whether there were pharmacists? You're too selfish." Ni Hanji looked icily at the 2 men in front of her. Both of them were good-looking people. Currently, Duanmu Qing was injured, and his face and wrist were stained with blood. Lu Yu was supporting him, but it didn't affect his handsome appearance at all. Instead, it added a bit of sickly beauty to him. Chapter 4190. Ni Hanji's eyes flickered as she thought. These 2 before me, along with those young sirs from the Qin estate, are indeed worthy of the title of exceptionally fine young sirs. Unfortunately, their temperaments were too unruly and aloof, and not a single one of them gave her a good look. When she was on Medicine King Island, no man dared to treat her like this. When she traveled outside with her master, she was always flattered by every patrician family they visited. When had she ever encountered these stubborn people? Eldest young Sir Qin creased his brows and glanced speechlessly at the woman before him. Could it be that this woman's lunacy flared up again? Did she think that Mo Lien and Duanmu Qing were her servants or subjects? How dare she berate them like this? The Omega Kotoku young master also abruptly creased his brows and turned his head away in disgust. Qin Jiu pursed his lips and said, "Are you crazy? What did it have to do with a woman from Medicine King Island like you whether or not they have medicinal effects and whether or not they want to use it? Did you have to show such an interrogative tone? Why aren't you saying anything?" Ni Hanji stood there majestically and questioned furiously. Earlier, she clearly said that if there was an apothecary, they would step forward themselves. In the end, no one paid her any attention. It was simply infuriating. Before Mo Lien could slap this person away, the little stoic teleported in front of Ni Hanji and swiftly darted her ferrule out from her sleeve. Eldest young Sir Qin couldn't resist covering his face with his hand. He had a premonition that the following scene would be very explosive. As expected, the little stoic's frosty face that wouldn't melt for 1,000 years slapped Ni Hanji's face with her ferrule without a second word. After a crisp slap, Ni Hanji was still a little taken aback. She probably never expected that someone would actually dare to lay a hand on her, someone from the dignified Medicine King Island. Hence, when the other ferrule slapped her right cheek, she finally snapped out of her daze with grief and indignation. Her small face contorted as she shouted harshly, "You dare lay a hand on me?" Xiao Mu flew up and kicked Ni Hanji in the stomach, directly sending her flying. She somersaulted 3 times in a row before slamming her into a low dirt wall with a bang. Everyone turned pale with fright as they dodged to the left and right. They covered their heads and squatted down, not even daring to breathe. Soon after, they discovered that the little stoic was only targeting that young lady from Medicine King Island. She didn't even glance at the others. The 2 rows of guards from the Medicine King Island glared angrily. Just as they were about to step forward with their sabers drawn, they were surrounded by a group of black-clothed youths, unable to move an inch forward. Ridiculous. What the hell? You talk too much. With a cold expression, the little stoic kicked Enai Hanji 3 times in a row, sending her tumbling heavily in front of eldest young Sir Qin. All the young sirs of the Qin estate simultaneously retreated 3 steps in unison and very perceptively cleared out an empty space for the little stoic to display her skills. The little stoic had truly endured this person for too long. If it wasn't for her master, why would she tolerate her? Grandmaster He-Wen had such a good temperament and self-restraint. How could he have taken in such a foolish disciple? Did his brain fall into a manure ditch? Did he not bring it out when he was born? The little stoic's pent-up fury finally dissipated after she was kicked several times in succession and given a round of violent beatings with the ferrule. She turned her head and angrily shouted at Duanmu Qing, "Acting on your own initiative." Young Sir Duanmu was a bit stupefied. Yuan Shichen could not help but twitch the corner of his mouth. He raised his hand and patted Duanmu Qing sympathetically. With a mocking expression, he said, "Although Qiao Qiao was beating that person up, all 4 sentences were scolding you. I speak a lot of nonsense?" Duanmu Qing was instantly speechless. Chapter 4191. To Arbor, Duanmu Qing's words of severing her wrist and no problem were probably nonsense. Mo Lien was a bit speechless. She walked up and pulled her expressionless wife back. All right, there's no need for you to do it yourself. If you don't like her, just have Yi and the others beat her up. Ao? Yi nodded in agreement. They had long found this bossy peacock-like woman displeasing to the eye. What the hell was she? Shouting and wrangling in front of the crown prince. Did she really think she was someone important? Wasn't she just a minor disciple from Medicine King Island? What right did she have to be so rude to His Highness and think so highly of herself? Enai Hanji's face was filled with terror, and she swayed from side to side before barely managing to stand up straight. Her hair was disheveled, and locks of her hair drooped in front of her chest. Her face was covered in bloodstains, and her eyes were beaten to a pulp, so she couldn't see the things in front of her clearly. "What are you doing?" 2 lackeys hastily squeezed through the crowd and rushed over, yelling angrily at Arbor and the others. These 2 people were from Chengdu's Lin family. They had specially accompanied this Miss Enai to Jiaowei City to watch the competition and pass the time. They were considered upper-middle experts in the Lin family, so they were usually treated very well in the Lin family. They were also used to speaking arrogantly. When the little stoic beat up Enai Hanji just now, the little maidservant saw something amiss and immediately stealthily left the crowd to find these 2 people. Thus, when they arrived, they only saw Enai Hanji's weather-beaten and miserable appearance and didn't know what exactly happened. Xiao Mu coldly swept those 2 people a glance. "And who are you?" The 2 lackeys were discerning people. They saw that although Arbor was only wearing a simple academy white robe, he was far from a normal person's match. They didn't dare to be rash at once and cup their hands in salute. "We are from Chengdu's Lin family." Seeing that their attitudes were acceptable, Arbor didn't want to argue with them and turned to walk to Mo Lien and Duanmu Qing. "Let's go back." Everyone nodded in agreement. The zombies in this area were more or less cleaned up, and the people who needed to be saved were saved. The group of people planned to return to the city lord's mansion first before discussing the matter. Enai Hanji was supported by a young maidservant. She was so angry that her body trembled. She swayed and said angrily, "Stop her." The 2 retainers of the Lin family looked at each other and said hesitantly, "Miss and I, we're alone, so we should," before the words, "forget it," could be spat out, Enai Hanji's twisted face became even more twisted and ugly. "Lin Jun Lin Xiang, how dare you disobey my orders?" Enai Hanji shouted angrily, as if she had gone crazy. "What did Patriarch Lin tell the 2 of you when you came here? You have to listen to me. I'm asking the 2 of you to kill this woman at all costs." Enai Hanji shouted, "Otherwise, the 2 of you don't have to return to the Lin family." Both Lin Jun and Lin Xiang's eyes flashed with a hint of anger. Enai Hanji's temper was something that no one could stand. Although the 2 of them were ordered to protect her, they weren't selling themselves as slaves, okay? Enai Hanji's matter-of-fact attitude was truly unbearable, and they also felt a bit mentally exhausted. Lin Jun restrained his anger and cupped his hands at her. Miss Enai, it's better to have some self-awareness as a person. What a joke. The row of people standing next to the little stoic all had unfathomable cultivations. Chapter 4192. Although a few of the sirs merely stood there and looked at them indifferently, Lin Jun felt that the two brothers couldn't discern their cultivation realms at all. Rashly attacking was tantamount to asking for humiliation. They weren't that stupid. Would they go up and ask for a beating? Wasn't it simply hilarious? The round-faced maidservant supported her miss, wiping her tears in heartache. Miss, how are you, miss? Enai Hanji tightly gripped the maidservant's hand, her body trembling in anger. She pointed at the Lin brothers across from her. You. Lin Jun stepped forward with a helpless expression and said, Miss Enai is injured, and this place is extremely unsafe. How about this? Us brothers will escort Miss Enai back to the capital first. Enai Hanji shrieked, You're simply audacious. The maidservant also said angrily, You actually angered Miss to this extent. Lin Jun and Lin Xiang exchanged glances and walked closer to Enai Hanji. They cupped their hands and said, Miss Enai, please. Enai Hanji forcefully pushed Lin Jun's arm away, her face so contorted that it was about to split open. If she could kill with her gaze right now, Lin Jun and Lin Xiang probably would have been killed countless times by Enai Hanji. The resentment in her heart nearly accumulated into a vast ocean, and she coldly turned to look in Arbor's direction. The latter only glanced back at her indifferently. It was obvious that he didn't care about her at all. Enai Hanji clenched her fists and had just charged forward 2 steps when the maidservant firmly grabbed her hand. Me, Mississippi. The maidservant wasn't stupid. She originally sought out the Lin brothers to help Miss, but now she saw that she couldn't move them. If Miss rushed forward herself, it was no different from walking right into a trap. She was bound to be humiliated by that icy stoic face again. Enai Hanji secretly gritted her teeth. Although she was unwilling, it was clear that she simply couldn't beat that stoic face. In the end, she could only give up and say with a contorted expression, Return first. She would think of a countermeasure after returning. This matter couldn't be resolved so easily. Enai Hanji had suffered such a huge loss, so how could she let the stoic face have it easy by himself? Her venomous gaze stared at Arbor's back, and she shifted her gaze back with difficulty. Just as she was about to leave, she saw the little stoic take 2 steps before abruptly turning her head around, her cold and severe eyes locking onto her figure. It looks like you still want to continue making trouble for me. The little stoic's voice was endlessly eerie. Hearing this, everyone present shuddered in unison. Lin Jun knew he was in trouble. He raised his hand and was about to grab Enai Hanji when he suddenly heard the sound of a whip. Slap. His left hand was slapped back. Originally, I would have spared you this time out of consideration for your esteemed master, Sir He Wen. The little stoic coldly stared at her and said, But an idiot is an idiot. Since you don't care about your life, then die. Everyone was speechless. Arbor thought to himself, who knows what kind of trouble he'll cause in the future if we leave this disaster behind? Recently, things had been very chaotic. She had wholeheartedly wanted to deal with Tian Yun and uncover the rats that Tian Yun had hidden in the various aristocratic families. How could she have the time to deal with a small character like Enai Hanji? Rather than letting this person endlessly prance around in front of her, it would be better to deal with her once and for all. Seeing that she was about to kill, the 2 brothers, Lin Jun and Lin Xiang, had no choice but to brace themselves and step forward. They cupped their hands and said, Please forgive us. Enai Hanji simply didn't dare to believe that Arbor wasn't done beating her up and wanted to kill her now. Chapter 4193. Her expression twisted as she shrieked, Do you want to make an enemy out of Medicine King Island? So what if I do? Arbor looked at her coldly, the vine whip in his hand glowing with a green light. Dark thorns grew and sprouted one by one. Enai Hanji shouted angrily, How dare you Before she could finish her sentence, She fell to the ground in fright from a flash of cold light. Hanji looked back and saw a small blue nail nailed to the ground on the left. The weeds on the ground withered and turned into fine powder in less than a second. It was obvious how terrifying the poison on the nail was. Her small fingers curled up as if they were twitching, and her body stiffly shifted backward. Her eyes were filled with terror as she looked at Xiao Mu, who was coldly gazing down at her from a high vantage point. At this moment, she suddenly felt like death was closing in. Why was she in such a sorry state? Lin Jun was just about to rush forward when Arbor's vine whipped him back. "The two of you better mind your own business," Mo Lien said coldly. Following the clanging of swords leaving their sheaths, Lin Jun and Lin Xiang silently looked at each other. Looking at the dozens of black-clothed youths surrounding them, they could only take 2 steps back. It wasn't that they didn't want to help Miss Hanji, but the other side had too many people. They couldn't help even if they wanted to. Arbor looked coldly at the kneeling Hanji for a long time before saying faintly, "Kill her." She had no interest in being entangled with her any longer. Rather than having to deal with this woman in the future, it was easier to just kill her and end it all. The hatred in the other party's eyes couldn't be ignored. If she kept this hatred and allowed it to grow, who knew what would happen in the future? The 2 accompanying black-clothed youths nodded and leaped up, holding their swords as they walked in front of Hanji. She heard a panting voice calling out anxiously, "Please, please have mercy on me. Crown Princess, Your Highness the Crown Prince, please, please show mercy." A white-bearded, white-haired, green-robed elder hurriedly squeezed through the crowd and hurriedly bowed to Mo Lien and Arbor. Arbor was startled. His expression was a little complicated as he dodged to the side. He did not accept his greeting. Hewen said anxiously, "My disciple is willful and reckless, and has a willful temperament. It's all my fault for not being strict enough in my daily supervision. This old man is willing to accept the punishment on behalf of my disciple. Please forgive me, Master." Hanji stamped her feet and cried out anxiously, "Shut up." Hewen turned his head and glared at her with an expression that said, "I'll deal with you later." Looking at his anxious expression, Arbor's eyes rippled as if 2 tiny ripples had appeared in the depths of his pupils. Mo Lien had been looking down at Jojo the whole time. When she saw her expression, she couldn't help but wonder what was on her mind. Jojo's originally cold expression seemed to have softened quite a bit. Arbor's thoughts had drifted far away, as if he had returned to his childhood. That day, a friend of the old sect master's brought his grandson to visit. In the end, the little stoic got into a fight with this stinky brat when the old sect master's friend saw his grandson beaten black and blue, looking like he had suffered a loss. He was instantly enraged and wanted to punish her. At that time, Mrongsun also stood in front of him with a grin like this and blocked that person's hand with a wave of her hand. "It's this peak master's fault for not being strict enough with my disciples. I'm the one who should be punished. Why did you hit my disciple? Jojo? Jojo." Chapter 4194. When Mo Lien saw her standing there silently with glittering eyes, he couldn't help but feel a bit anxious. Thinking that she was bewitched again, he hastily shook her body. On the side, young Master Omega Kotoku harumphed coldly. Eldest Qin involuntarily turned his head to look at him. "What is it? You think she's bewitched all day long, but you don't help her completely eradicate it." Young Master Omega Kotoku sneered. "Something will happen sooner or later." Eldest Qin sighed and unhurriedly waved the folding fan in his hand. "You can't be too hasty with this kind of thing, right? Could it be that second brother knows why the little stoic is constantly bewitched?" When the little stoic really flared up, she really didn't look like a living person. Her eyes were lifeless, and it really made people feel a bit uncomfortable just looking at her. Young Master Omega Kotoku abruptly turned his head and coldly spat out 2 words from between his teeth. "I don't know." "Jojo." Mo Lien shook the little fellow, causing her to recover from her daze. Raising her head to glance at him, the little stoic meaningfully revealed 2 tiny teeth. "I'm fine," she said softly and turned to look at the group of men in black waiting with swords in hand, waiting to act on orders. She shook her head and said, "Let them go." This time, even eldest young Master Qin couldn't help but look at her strangely. This little stoic, she wasn't someone who would casually waver. Just as he was about to say something, he saw Arbor waving his hand and already leading Mo Lien away. Yi and the others naturally sheathed their swords and hastily followed. Mo Lien looked back and coldly gazed at the woman standing there with trembling legs and a half-bent waist. Arbor grabbed his hand at once and pulled him back. She looked up at her husband and lightly shook her head. Mo Lien raised his sword-like eyebrows and nodded reluctantly. Hanji didn't know that she had just rolled around in a sea of fire. How could the little stoic not know the Crown Prince's thoughts? She was soft-hearted, but that didn't mean that the Crown Prince would be soft-hearted. The Crown Prince would often deal with the aftermath, including Hanji, who might cause trouble. She was definitely within the Crown Prince's dangerous range. "Jojo, what did you see just now?" Mo Lien asked softly. Arbor was silent for a moment before quietly saying, "I saw Murong Sun. I even saw the old sect master squatting at the side with his palm leaf fan, looking like he was watching a good show as he called out, 'Ah Sun, don't fight with sect master Zhao.' Old man Zhao, you bastard. How can you still be so narrow-minded after so many years? You're hitting my disciple, ouch. Ah Sun, don't hit old Zhao, his old bones can't withstand your torment." Mo Lien pulled the little fellow into her embrace and lightly patted her back. She lowered her head and smiled at her. "We haven't returned to the Holy Water sect for a long time. Let's turn back and take a look. If my master was still alive, I definitely wouldn't be like Miss and I and cause trouble for my master everywhere," Arbor said in a low voice. My Jojo is the most sensible." Arbor nodded. "I'm very obedient. When Peak Master Murong wakes up, we'll accompany her to tour the mountains and rivers of the Divine Province." "What's wrong with that?" The little stoic's eyes instantly brightened, as if a gorgeous color had been injected into them. "Ming Province's Crown Prince and the others are coming over," someone shouted. Everyone looked up and saw Ming Yasi and his group quickly walking over while escorting over 1,000 old, weak, and sick people. Ming Yasi raised his brows when he saw the little stoic. "Why are your eyes red?" Chapter 4195. Xiao Mu was unwilling to acknowledge him and turned her small head away at the first instance. "It's none of your business," Mo Lien retorted in annoyance. She pulled her wifey and headed toward the City Lord Manor. Yasi harumphed and turned to catch up with them. "Did you make her angry?" "Shut up." Mo Lien turned around to glare at him. She didn't want to talk to him, but she couldn't help but raise her brows when she saw the old, weak, sick, and disabled following behind him. "We've already checked their bodies. Can you be sure they haven't been poisoned? When the time came, they would have to evacuate the rest of the people. If there were some uncontrollable people in the group who could mutate and go on a rampage at any time, things would be a little difficult. After all, they couldn't keep an eye on so many people along the way. It was inevitable that they would overlook something. Once a riot broke out, it would only affect the lowest rung of society, the ordinary people with no cultivation at all." Ming Yasi also wasn't willing to talk to Mo Lien, so he harumphed and retorted, "Who can guarantee that? We can only take things one step at a time. I have a kind of medicinal liquid here." Arbor suddenly spoke up. "You can try it." Yasi turned to look at her, his eyes brightening. "You're talking to me?" Mo Lien chuckled at that person and pulled Arbor away. She asked in a low voice, "What do we need to prepare?" 15 minutes later, everyone who had been brought back stood in front of the City Lord Manor. There were more than 10,000 commoners, and all of them looked exhausted. Yasi ordered them to line up in a square formation. More than 10 wash basins were arranged neatly in front of them. The wash basins were filled with a green medicinal liquid that looked very clear and bright, with a gentle color. "Now, everyone in the first row, come forward and wash your hands in the wash basins." The row of people walked forward nervously and squatted down to put their hands in the wash basins. They felt a gentle stream of water pass through their palms, and they couldn't help but feel energized. In less than 2 seconds, Mayas had them line up behind him. Although the onlookers didn't know what was going on, they vaguely understood that as long as nothing happened when they washed their hands, they could stand behind these practitioners and go to a safe place. Everyone came forward with a trace of panic and fear, and then were brought back to Arbor and the others in groups in high spirits and rearranged in a square formation. Suddenly, in the third basin, the originally light green medicinal liquid suddenly boiled up, revealing a trace of a strange black color. The faces of the guards on both sides suddenly changed as they pulled out the sharp blades in their hands. The old woman squatting in front of the basin was obviously shocked by their actions. She knelt on the ground and held a 5- or 6-year-old child tightly in one hand. The child was so frightened that he immediately burst into tears. Arbor quickly walked over and waved his hand to dismiss the two guards with swords and sabers. His eyes were filled with complex emotions as he stared at the old woman before him. "Isolate him first." The old woman looked back at him in panic and exclaimed, "What are you doing? You are bullying the good people." Arbor shook his head slightly and said faintly, "It's not her, it's that child." Everyone stilled when they heard this. Chapter 4196. The old woman grew even more flustered as she hugged her grandson tightly. She glared furiously at Arbor. What are you trying to do?" Arbor stared at her coldly for a good while before sighing softly. "If this child isn't suppressed with medicine soon, he'll turn into a zombie in less than an hour. When the time comes, who will bear the consequences? Granny, you hid your grandson in the crowd. You're irresponsible to yourself, and you're equally irresponsible to others." The old woman shuddered. She wanted to speak, but when she met Arbor's cold gaze, she shrank back. But soon, she grabbed her grandson's arm again. She stared at Aoi and his men in horror and shouted, "Don't come here! You can't kill my grandson. He's still young. He's still young. You can't." This old woman. Ming Yasi's eyes flashed with impatience as he roared, "No one here wants to kill your grandson. Didn't you hear me just now? If this child of yours isn't suppressed by medicine, he'll mutate." The old woman heard clearly this time. She looked at Arbor's group with trembling eyes. "Why you can really save my grandson?" Ming Yasi didn't seem to want to answer the old woman's superfluous question. He merely sneered and waved his hand to have the old woman and child carried away. Then he said coldly, "I hope you won't waste our time. I'm sure anyone with eyes can see what the situation is like right now. I hope those of you who have been lightly injured or bitten by zombies will step forward on your own accord." As soon as these words came out, many people's faces showed slight panic. Ming Yasi said, "The apothecaries in the group can suppress the zombie poison in some of you. If you don't step forward now, don't blame us for treating you as despicable and shameless people who deliberately hid the truth. We'll throw you out here for good." When he said this, everyone became even more nervous. In the subsequent tests, everyone was extremely cautious. Their hands touched the surface of the water, and they didn't dare to stay there for long. They immediately withdrew their hands. Ming Yasi couldn't resist using his eyes to size up the little stoic standing not far away, and a strange look appeared in the depths of his eyes. "You can measure it so quickly?" Arbor glanced at him, nodded, and turned to tug at her husband's hand. Mo Lien threw a cold glance at Ming Yasi and said indifferently, "I'll leave this place to you." What did he mean by handing it over to him? Ming Yasi's eyes turned fierce as he took a few steps forward. He was about to argue with Mo Lien again when he heard a cry of alarm from the side. "Your Highness, this is bad. This man is starting to mutate." Dark Yas turned his head and saw that a small area in front of him had started to become chaotic. His gaze turned even colder as he reprimanded angrily, "What are you all standing there for? Hurry up and disperse them. Don't panic. Continue to test the remaining people with the liquid. Don't try to fish in troubled waters." In the end, Divine Province and Ming Province each brought back 2,000 or so people from Jiawei City in batches. The remaining people would be brought back by the 4 great cities for consumption. Arbor and Mo Lien didn't bring so many people back to the capital. Instead, they sent other people to settle down these miserable commoners. The duo arrived at the capital a day later. Chapter 4197. The first news he received was that Empress Dowager Qin, who had gone to Mount Heaven Saint to fast and pray, had been carried back. Yes, she was carried back. It was said that this old lady began to fall ill as soon as she arrived at Mount Heaven Saint. After a serious illness, her entire body was emaciated, as if she could be blown away by the wind. She was very miserable and pitiful. King Jianping submitted a memorial, saying in a tearful voice that he must bring back the Empress Dowager to show his filial piety. He said that the Empress Dowager was old. If she lived in the mausoleum all year round, she would inevitably be contaminated with the aura of death, which was naturally not good for her body. Moreover, from ancient times until now, Jianping had done his homework. He had listed countless acts of filial piety by emperors, generals, and ministers, and earnestly persuaded Mo Lushing to be filial and conform to the way of the emperor. Thus, Mo Lushing couldn't bear the annoyance and really brought the old lady back. But once he brought her back, Mo Lushing directly sent the old lady to King Jianping's residence, asking King Jianping to take good care of the Empress Dowager on his behalf. King Jianping, who had secretly received a large sum of money from Empress Dowager Qin and was counting the spirit coins happily, was a little dumbfounded on the spot. Indeed, he had said that in the way of filial piety, he should take good care of the Empress Dowager. He had even written a long speech in front of His Majesty. But damn, he had never said that he wanted to bring Empress Dowager Qin back to live in his residence? He wasn't someone who had nothing to do and liked to court death as much as he liked. What kind of good days could there be if he brought Empress Dowager Qin, this great Buddha, into his residence? He didn't expect that he actually found himself an old lady to take care of at home. Don't you think His Majesty is a fraud? As for the second news that Arbor and Emolian received. On the second day after all of them withdrew from Jiaowei City was occupied by an unknown force. Now, the entire city was filled with rotting corpse puppets. They were like the guards of this city, pacing back and forth, letting out sensational roars from time to time. Arbor was only silent for a moment before saying, "Tian has a base on the surface. It will be slightly more convenient for us to deal with it in the future." Emolian smiled and nodded. "Don't worry about this. Running back and forth is torturous. Let's rest for today. If there's anything, we can talk about it tomorrow." Arbor looked at her and nodded. "Bathe together?" Arbor nodded again. Emolian's eyes lit up when he heard this. He stepped forward and hugged his wife. "Let's go." The next day, the Crown Prince was summoned to the imperial study by His Majesty early in the morning. The father and son spent the whole morning talking about Jiaowei City. "We can only do this for now," Mo Lushing said with a frown. "In the past, Tianyun was in the dark while we were in the light. We were always on the defensive." Mo Lushing patted Emolian's shoulder and said in a low voice, "Now that they are in the open, it will be easier to deal with them in the future." As the two of them were talking, a young eunuch reported, "Your Majesty, Your Highness the Crown Prince." The Crown Princess sent someone to inform the Crown Prince that she has been invited to King Jianping's mansion. Mo Lushing couldn't help but twitch his mouth, thinking, "Is Jianping seeking death again?" He turned back to look at his son. Sure enough, he saw that the latter's handsome face was already covered with dark clouds. He hurriedly said, Why don't you go back and take a look first?" Emolian naturally had to go back. She walked out with a sullen face, turning a deaf ear to the great emperor's muttering, "Don't scare your little uncle." Chapter 4198. She scared the old king of Jianping? Of course he was scared. When he heard a servant report that the crown princess's carriage had already arrived at the entrance, the old king of Jianping's hand trembled, and the half cup of hot tea directly spilled onto the ground. Fuck, why would this great Buddha suddenly grace his king of Jianping's estate with her presence? It wasn't that he was a coward, but he had suffered at the hands of this little ancestor time and time again. After being tricked by her, he wouldn't seek abuse for no reason. The old king of Jianping practically roared, "Who invited her here?" The servant replied with trepidation, Her Majesty the Empress Dowager said that she wants to see Her Majesty the Crown Princess." The old king of Jianping slapped his forehead, instantly looking like he was about to faint. He wanted to say something, but a cold and clear voice sounded by his ear. What? Does the king of Giant Pain not welcome this crown princess? The old king of Giant Pain's lips trembled. He really wanted to retort, so what if I don't welcome you? But when he opened his mouth, a flattering voice that even he found hard to believe came out. How could that be? The crown princess has graced us with her presence. My humble abode shines with light. My humble abode shines with light. Arbor glanced at him, then his gaze landed on Mo-kun, who was sitting upright and kneeling beside a small table with a teacup in his hands. How have you been, King of Giant Pain's heir? Mo-kun, King of Giant Pain's heir, revealed a smile that he believed to be handsome and incomparably confident and at ease. He nodded and said, Thank you for your concern, Crown Princess. Mo-kun has been doing well recently. The little Crown Princess snorted coldly. She turned around and saw a servant girl dressed in a green servant's uniform hastily crossing the hall to greet them. Greetings, Crown Princess. Greetings, Your Highness and the heir. Your Highness, this servant is here on Her Majesty the Empress Dowager's order to invite the Crown Princess to the small garden. The old king of Giant Pain forcefully restrained his expression that was about to change and nodded calmly. May I know why the Empress Dowager summoned the Crown Princess? The little girl lowered her head and said very appropriately, The Empress Dowager didn't say, so we didn't dare to ask. At this moment, the old king of Giant Pain wished he could whip the old woman and throw her into a frying pan. If you want to cause trouble for the Crown Princess, why do you have to cause trouble in my mansion? Just how bored must you be to do something like this? The little Crown Princess stared deeply at the little girl who was bowing in front of her. After a while, the girl felt cold sweat dripping down her forehead. The Crown Princess suddenly said softly, Lead the way. The moment she opened her mouth, the little girl felt the pressure on her suddenly disappear. She couldn't help but let out a long sigh. She didn't dare to act rashly and bowed respectfully in front of Arbor. Crown Princess, please. When he turned around and led the little Crown Princess out the door, the little girl couldn't help but clench her fists under her sleeves and quicken her pace nervously. After a while, the entire hall was filled with a deathly stillness. The maids and servants stood on both sides with lowered eyes. They naturally didn't dare to make a sound at this time to anger their master. The old king of Giant Pain finally clapped his hands angrily. What are you still standing there for? Go to the Eastern Palace and inform His Highness the Crown Prince. That brat better not think that I invited his wife. He didn't want to experience the virtues of those two black-bellied bastards again. Turning to look at Mo-kun, who was still kneeling in front of the table and unmoving like a mountain, the king of Giant Pain couldn't help but feel angry. What are you still sitting there for? Hurry up and scram into the palace to find your elder brother. Woo, Royal Father, my legs are weak. Royal Father couldn't tell that he wasn't kneeling, but directly kneeling. I've been busy these 2 days and I'm not in good spirits. Chapter 4199. Mo-kun was at a loss for words, feeling extremely aggrieved. Did she think he wanted to do this? He truly felt fearful for no reason after seeing the little Crown Princess. It was as if someone had struck the depths of his soul, and he inexplicably ordered his body to know its place. Boo-hoo, he didn't want to be so cowardly either, but what could he do? From what he could see, his old father didn't seem to be able to be tough with that person either. The old king of Giant Pain was like a bird startled by the twang of a bow. He anxiously stomped his feet and pointed at the 2 page boys. Why aren't you helping the heir up? Kun, hurry into the palace and explain this matter to your elder brother. Explain it clearly. Of course, this matter had to be explained clearly. If the Crown Prince misunderstood and thought that their king of Giant Pain's mansion didn't like the Crown Princess and invited her over to cause trouble, wouldn't that be an undeserved calamity? Mo-kun's face was bitter, and his expression was somewhat conflicted. Royal Father, can I not go? His old father himself was afraid of the Crown Prince, so he sent his son. However, his son, Mo-kun, also felt fearful when he saw the Crown Prince for no reason. It would be best if they didn't meet if they could. Mo-kun looked at the old king of Giant Pain, his expression saying, Don't screw your son over. The old king of Giant Pain was furious. and he kicked his son down the steps from the small table. Emokuin's face was bitter as he scrambled toward the door. Seeing that his old father was about to kick him again, he hurriedly shouted, I'll go, can't I go? The old king of Giant Pain shouted in exasperation, hurry up and prepare the carriage for the heir. Hurry up. He kicked his sons but again, kicking Emokuen out of the central room. Emokuen crawled up from the ground and fled outside like a fleeing rabbit. He ran out in tears, feeling aggrieved and pitiful. While the king of Giant Pain's mansion was in a state of chaos, the little crown princess followed the steps in the back garden of the king of Giant Pain's mansion under the guidance of a maid. As the late emperor's youngest son, the king of Giant Pain was used to complaining about being poor and extorting benefits in front of his older brothers. Along the way to King Giant Pain's mansion, there were clusters of flowers and brocade, richly ornamented beams and painted rafters, and golden-colored glazed roofs that shone brightly under the sunlight. How could he be as poor as the old prince of Giant Pain who cried outside? The little girl who was leading the way had her neck shrunk and her back arched, looking very cautious. Although she looked thin and small, her speed was not slow. Along the way, Arbor's lips were filled with mockery. She wanted to see what kind of tricks this Empress Dowager Chen had up her sleeves after finally coming back from Mount Heaven Saint. She was not Lien's father. A cold light flashed in Arbor's eyes, revealing a bit of killing intent. She had already tolerated the Empress Dowager, who disliked her in every way and always wanted to find trouble with her. Her patience had run out. The little girl in front of him suddenly stopped in her tracks and looked around. She revealed a bewildered expression at the right moment. There were a few drops of sweat on her forehead, which glowed faintly under the faint sunlight. My apologies, the little girl said with trepidation. Her Majesty the Empress Dowager was indeed here before. Now she should have returned to her bedchamber. Why don't the Crown Princess wait here for a moment? I will go to Her Majesty the Empress Dowager's residence to invite her. Arbor did not hesitate to fling a vine whip over and wrap it around the girl's waist. Chapter 4200. The little girl's expression changed slightly, and she hastily turned to look at Arbor. Crown Princess, why are you doing this? Arbor gazed at her apathetically. This Crown Princess will follow you over to pay respects to Her Majesty the Queen Dowager. There's no need to go through so much trouble. When she said the word, pay respects, the little girl felt that the little stoic's voice was extremely icy for some reason. She shuddered for no reason, and her entire body inexplicably shuddered along with her. What? Arbor stared at her icily. Do you still need to think carefully about where the Queen Dowager's bedchamber is? The little girl shuddered for no reason. She instantly realized something when she saw the trace of mockery hanging on that stoic face. She was afraid that the Crown Prince Consort had already seen through her little trick. But that was to be expected. The Crown Princess was originally an exceptionally intelligent person. Her little trick was clearly not enough in front of the Crown Princess. Who could she blame? She could only blame herself for being inferior. If she had been a bit faster just now and Qin Gong had shaken her off, he could have escaped by himself and left her here. There wouldn't be any problems or troubles. In that case, she might have to initiate another plan. The little girl took a deep breath and suddenly reached out to press it to her lips. However, before she could whistle, she felt pain on her fingertips. His face was filled with horror as he looked down, only to see two severed fingers falling to the ground. Blood gushed out, and the girl's complexion instantly paled. She was on the verge of collapsing. Xiao Mu twirled the glowing dagger in her hand as she stared at her frostily with a pair of chilly eyes. After a long while, she said, "Did you think that the fragrant powder scattered in this garden combined with the bewildering fragrance on your lapel would make me delirious after a long time?" The little girl couldn't help but shudder violently. Her eyes widened in shock as she stared at her in disbelief. It was as if Arbor had said something that made her feel extremely terrified. "Wishful thinking," Arbor said coldly. He glanced at the winding forest at the side. With a cry of surprise, a black figure was kicked out. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal smiled as he waved the small golden fan in his hand. However, his eyes were extremely cold. "Jojo, I caught a peeping Tom." Arbor's gaze fell on the black figure. He saw that it was a man in his early 20s, with oily hair and a powdered face. However, his shifty eyes kept darting back and forth in their sockets as they stared at Xiao Mu. Arbor asked coldly, "Who is this person?" The small garden was naturally quiet at this moment. The little girl, whose waist was wrapped by Arbor's wooden vines, didn't dare to speak. The man in his early 20s didn't dare to speak carelessly. Arbor said indifferently, "It doesn't matter if you don't want to talk. Search his soul." The girl looked at her in horror, her expression completely blank. She probably didn't expect that there would be such an arrogant person in this world. He proposed to search someone's soul just because of a disagreement. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal smiled and reached out to press the girl's head. The girl cried out in panic, "No, you can't kill me. You cannot." She screamed in horror and hurriedly roared, "I'll talk. I'll tell you everything. It's the young master of the Qin family. Qin, the young master of the Qin family's branch family." Madame wanted to frame the crown princess. She found this young master of the Qin family to fabricate the truth. Chapter 4201. Using some catalyzing drugs to create the illusion that the crown princess and young Master Qin are having an affair. Before she could finish, the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal slapped her across the face. "How dare you?" Ma Shurchen looked at the girl in disgust. At this moment, Xiao Mu had already kicked the ashen-faced young Master Qin to the ground. Her small foot stepped on the young master's face, ruthlessly rolling it around. Her eyes were filled with endless mockery. This brainless Empress Dowager was playing this kind of trick on her. It seemed that she had lived too comfortably in the harem for so long that she had completely forgotten what kind of world this was. A weakling dared to take advantage of her and wanted to teach her a lesson? Very well. At the same time, Empress Dowager Qin, who was eating seasonal fruits in her bedroom and enjoying the service of a palace maid, was leisurely leaning on the brocade couch. She was in a good mood and squinted her eyes slightly. She did not want to be so extreme, but that crown princess was too much of an eyesore. She blocked her way and was disobedient. She even took the position of Mo Lian's official wife and was not willing to give way to others. She ate the meat herself and did not even give others a drop of soup. Was there such a logic? Since that was the case, she could not be blamed for going all out and not showing any mercy. Empress Dowager Qin thought of the comfortable days to come and could not help but smile as she picked up a grape on the table. Just as she was about to put it into her mouth, she heard a loud bang. The door of her dormitory fell inwards with a loud bang, smashing into the ground with a loud bang. Empress Dowager Qin's fingers, which were holding the grape, froze. A slender red figure flew in and barged in. Outside, a thunder of drought came at the perfect moment. Boom! The eunuchs and palace maids kneeling by the Empress Dowager's feet all looked over in shock. Empress Dowager Crown Princess? At that moment, the little crown princess was dressed in a red battle robe. Under the thunderous drought, she looked particularly dazzling. Her snow-white face was expressionless. When she stared at the Empress Dowager, the latter shuddered unexpectedly. She felt like she was facing an evil spirit that had climbed up from the depths of hell. The little crown princess did not give them much time to react. She quickly walked forward and pulled Empress Dowager Qin off the fragrant brocade couch. She grabbed Empress Dowager Qin's long hair and dragged her out of the door like she was dragging a broom. Everyone was speechless. A eunuch reacted and screamed, "Empress Dowager!" When the young crown prince consort turned around to glare at him coldly, he immediately shut his mouth and obediently knelt at the side without moving. The Empress Dowager was rudely dragged from the couch to the floor. At this moment, because she was indoors, she was not wearing her outer garment, her doo-doo was half undone, and her undergarments were in disarray. However, she was forced to drag the young crown prince consort out the door. Empress Dowager Qin's eyes were filled with flames of anger. She felt her mind go blank as she lost control of her emotions and screamed out loud. "What are you doing? Crown Princess, you are truly audacious. How dare you? How dare you treat Aijia like this? Do you still have Aijia and the previous emperor in your eyes?" Arbor raised her hand and slapped Empress Dowager Chen's face that was covered in thick makeup. A sense of joy immediately rose in his heart. This damn woman, she had wanted to teach her a lesson for a long time. Chapter 4202. Did she really think that she, Xiao Mu, was a punching bag that would allow her to knead as she pleased, playing the dirty tricks of the palace all day long? Did she think that she, Arbor, was like those older sisters in the imperial harem who were defeated by her? Did she think that she could ruin her reputation and even earn Lian's disdain by using such unconventional tricks? Today, she wanted her to know the consequences of offending her, Arbor. When she thought of this, Arbor's hands didn't stop as she continued to drag the screaming Empress Dowager Chen towards the original small garden. She wanted to make things difficult for her again, right? Could the Prince of Giant Pain not hear the Empress Dowager's screams? But did he dare to provoke the young Crown Princess? The Empress Dowager and the Crown Princess didn't go back to the palace to fight, but insisted on fighting in his Prince of Giant Pain's residence. Who would believe him? The old Prince of Giant Pain suddenly felt that his life was full of bitterness and despair. His heart was in turmoil. Hurry and send someone to the palace to see if that brat Mo Kun managed to invite His Highness the Crown Prince. Your Highness, your wife has gone crazy. Hurry and stop her. The old Prince of Giant Pain didn't know yet. It was definitely a wise move for him to be terrified and not dare to come over to check. If he dared to interfere, Sir Jojo would definitely beat him up without a second word. Arbor didn't care if this old woman was about to die from being dragged by her all the way. She didn't have any pity for the fairer sex as she threw her onto the uneven dirt path in the garden. Empress Dowager Chen sat limply on the ground. Her hairpins were all messed up, her hair was disheveled, and her face was completely pale. That servant girl was originally tied to the side with wooden vines by Hu Jinchen. When she saw that the Empress Dowager was being dragged over by the young Crown Princess like a rag, she was immediately scared out of her wits. She struggled to free her hands that were tied behind her back and shouted sternly, "You, what do you want to do? What are you doing?" Arbor coldly glanced at them. His eyes were cold and indifferent, without the slightest bit of warmth. Such a bone-chilling gaze made Empress Dowager Chen's entire body tremble. Her heart was in a mess and she had a feeling that today was going to be bad. "Crown Princess, you need to calm down." Empress Dowager Chen still wanted to say something to comfort the scary little Crown Princess. However, Arbor did not allow her to continue. He raised his hand and sprinkled a handful of powder on the three of them. "Enjoy it," she said coldly before pulling He-Chen away. Empress Dowager Chen's eyes changed as she looked at young Master Chen who was crawling towards her while drooling. She finally shouted out in panic, Don't come over. What are you doing?" "Stop, you stand." Xiao Mu had purposely used a barrier to conceal the area where they were doing their work. This way, as long as she did not move away, no one would be blind enough to come and disturb the three of them. There was a hidden cold light in her eyes. When she returned to the King of Giant Pain's residence with He-Chen, they saw the old King of Giant Pain walking over with an uneasy expression. Crown Princess, what instructions does the Empress Dowager have?" Arbor took the tea from the servant and expressionlessly glanced at the King of Giant Pain. "I didn't meet the Empress Dowager at all." "King of Giant Pain, it was you who sneakily used the Queen Dowager's name to deliberately lure this Crown Prince consort here." Xiao Mu's small, solemn face abruptly changed on a whim. Chapter 4203. She slapped the armrest of the old Prince of Giant Pain's large carved hardwood chair, causing a neat piece to fall off. The little stoic glared angrily at him with a frosty face. "Prince of Giant Pain, are you trying to pick a quarrel and stir up trouble? Do you want compensation again? Do you know the consequences of deceiving this Crown Princess?" The old Prince of Giant Pain's mouth twitched as he looked at the piece of wood that had fallen to the ground. He hastily bowed and begged for forgiveness, repeatedly claiming that he didn't dare. He kept crying injustice and was just short of cursing and swearing to the heavens and earth. Royal Father, Royal Father, Royal Father." Mo Kuan ran in joyously and saw his royal father standing cowardly in front of the little crown princess, gesticulating and gesticulating about who knew what the hell he was talking about. Mo Kuan's eyelid twitched. He heard the little crown princess ask crisply expressionlessly, "You mean, the Queen Dowager really is in your estate?" "Yes, yes, yes, it's absolutely true." The old Prince of Giant Pain nodded repeatedly and volunteered, "Crown Princess, I can bring you there." "Royal Father." Mo Kuan couldn't resist interrupting. "The Crown Prince is already at our estate's entrance with his people." "What?" The old Prince of Giant Pain was startled, but he immediately revealed a joyous expression and hastily strode out the door. "Good, good, good. Then us father and son will go to the front door to welcome His Highness the Crown Prince." "No need." An indifferent voice appeared at the entrance and blew to the little stoic's side like a gust of wind. Mo Lien grabbed his wife's small hand and sized her up from head to toe. He only sighed in relief after seeing that she was fine. He turned to glance at the Prince of Giant Pain and his son before pulling Arbor's hand and quietly grumbling, "Jojo, why do you come whenever someone comes to find you? There's no need to pay attention to some strange people." The old Prince of Giant Pain rubbed his nose. The Queen Dowager used his Prince of Giant Pain estate's name to send an invitation to the Crown Princess. Then this strange person must be referring to him. The old King of Giant Pain didn't dare to retort back. He could only feel slightly aggrieved in his heart. With a pitiful voice, he retorted, "The Empress Dowager issued an imperial decree. I can't do anything about it." Prince Mo gritted his teeth as he held his wife's hand and asked, "Jojo, did that woman make things difficult for you?" "There was no such thing." Not only was there no such thing, she was the one who had turned the tables and given her a taste of her own medicine, making things difficult for her. Thinking of the current situation in the garden, the little crown princess couldn't help but reveal a look of disdain on her cold little face. Mo Lien had been paying attention to her the whole time, and the slight changes on her face naturally couldn't escape her eyes. His Jojo seemed to be in a good mood. "Where is the Empress Dowager?" Mo Lien asked coldly. Today, he was going to make it clear to this old woman that his wife was not someone who could be taught by just any Tom, Dick, or Harry. The old Prince of Giant Pain took it upon himself to lead the way, leading everyone in the direction of the Empress Dowager's bedchamber. "We'll reach the Empress Dowager after passing through this small garden." "Oh, that's right. Don't look at my garden, it seems to be very expensive. In fact, most of the precious flowers inside were sent over by my elder brothers." The Prince of Giant Pain sneaked a glance at Arbor and continued, "Ever since the last time we gave you, the Crown Princess, a series of compensations, life in the entire Prince of Giant Pain estate has taken a nosedive. It's very difficult." Arbor glanced speechlessly at the old Prince of Giant Pain. Chapter 4204. You can't just look at the surface of this garden and big house to see how precious they are. You have to look at their inner qualities. Most of the antiques in my residence, except for those that eldest brother and second brother gave me which are genuine, the rest are actually fakes. Crown Princess, Your Highness the Crown Prince, I'm really very poor. This fellow's bitter and vengeful gaze made it seem as if Arbor was here to collect debts again. Did she look like someone who wanted to kill them all? Mo Lien's lips twitched without batting an eyelid. "Where's the Empress Dowager's descendant?" "Her bedchamber is just in front." Before the old King of Giant Pain could finish speaking, he seemed to hear a faint, strange sound drifting over from the other side of the flower bed. The little crown princess pulled a long face and instinctively took 2 steps back. Beside her, Hu Shirchen turned to look at Mo Lien and revealed a meaningful expression. Mo Lien rolled her eyes at him and reached out to pull his wife to her side. Hugging her, she whispered, "Wife, be careful. There might be something unusual in front." The old King of Giant Pain, Hu Shirchen, Mo Kuren, being caught off guard and being fed dog food was really terrible. In their eyes, Prince Mo, who was always showing off dog food, was really a little shameless. Especially the old King of Giant Pain, who was fuming with rage. Although his residence wasn't as impregnable as the Imperial Palace, nor was it as strictly managed as Prince Kang's residence, at least it was still passable. What did he mean by there was something unusual? How could there be something unusual? Unusual? The old king of Giant Pain's eyes instantly turned round. He suddenly saw that the small garden in front of him seemed to have opened up. In the flower bed in front, there were 3 white figures twisting together in a very frightening posture. One of them suddenly moved his body and turned his face around. When the old king of Giant Pain saw that face, he was so frightened that he fell to the ground on his butt. He kicked his legs and screamed, "I'm blind, I'm blind." Arbor flipped her hand and took out 2 silver needles. Here. The old king of Giant Pain looked at her in shock. Was she asking him to stab himself in the eyes? Damn it. This girl was too ruthless. How dare he make the Empress Dowager look like this? The king of Giant Pain had just shivered when he heard the young crown princess's cold and stern voice. How dare you? How dare you do such a despicable thing in broad daylight? Prince Mo reacted quickly as well. Although he had never heard his wife say that she would do this, he immediately got into character and started cooperating with her. His face sank, and he said angrily, "Are they all dead? Hurry up and separate them." The disgusting appearance of these 3 people was simply an eyesore. The young crown princess stared coldly at the disheveled woman and sneered, "What are you waiting for? Such a woman who tarnished the previous emperor's reputation naturally has to be executed immediately." Mo Lien then said, "Someone, give her 3 feet of white silk." Everyone, wasn't it a little too fast for the 2 of them to sing and brag? Even if the county magistrate was trying a case, shouldn't he at least have a first trial? You guys, do you have to deal with the Empress Dowager so quickly and strangely? Arbor glanced sideways and saw Ao Yi jump up with the white silk in his hands. Her eyes immediately twitched. A strange thought flashed through her mind. Could it be that Ao Yi carried several strands of white silk with him in his inner world to deal with such sudden situations at any time? Empress Dowager Chen looked at the 2 men in black walking over quickly, and her pupils suddenly shrank. Let's adjust the time tomorrow. It's estimated to be 4 or 5 in the afternoon. Chapter 4205. Crown Prince. Empress Dowager Chen's powdered old face was ruined by the tears and snot flowing down her face. She was so angry that she was trembling. She pointed a trembling finger at the little crown princess. "It's her." She framed Ijia. "It's her." You can't not ask for the reason. Empress Dowager Chen looked in horror at the white silk around her neck and shouted, "Stop, stop." Ijia was dragged out of her bedroom by the crown princess and thrown here. This bitch planned this. Under the crown prince's gaze, Ao Yi slapped Empress Dowager Chen's mouth without hesitation. The 2 guards took the white silk from Ao Yi's hand and immediately wrapped it around her neck. They pulled the 2 ends and tightened it without any explanation. Arbor looked coldly at the Empress Dowager, who was kneeling there with a face full of panic. At this time, this woman didn't have any of her usual graceful and luxurious appearance. She was completely a dirty beggar woman with a sad face from crying. "When did I go to your bedroom?" Arbor's voice was cold. In Empress Dowager Chen's ears, it was especially heartless. "You're the one who is shameless. You messed around with your Chen family's smelly bug and now you dare to open your mouth?" Arbor looked coldly at her. Empress Dowager Chen was already choked by the white silk and she couldn't speak. Her old face turned purple. Suddenly, she heard a servant anxiously announce, "Grand Concubine Fong has arrived. Left Prime Minister Chun Chaoji requests an audience." Grand Concubine Fong and Qin Chaoji hurried over. When they saw the scene in the garden, their expressions changed. "Stop!" Grand Concubine Fong shouted in shock. A person immediately jumped out from behind her and threw a dart at the Empress Dowager. It hit the white silk in the middle and directly cut it in half. The 2 guards each held a broken piece of the white silk and suddenly took a step back. Grand Concubine Fong quickly pushed aside the guards in front of her and ran to Empress Dowager Qin. She took a silk robe from a maid and wrapped it around Empress Dowager Qin, who was sitting on the ground in a mess. "Empress Dowager." Empress Dowager Qin grabbed Old Concubine Fong's hand in tears. "Old Concubine, are you here to save me? What the hell is going on?" Old concubine Fong hurriedly turned to look in the direction of Crown Prince. Crown Prince, Empress Dowager is the Emperor's father and your grandmother. How can you? The little stoic expressionlessly interrupted her. Grand Consort Fong, we don't blame you for going up to cause trouble without knowing the reason. However, it's best that you don't interfere in this matter, lest you attract trouble for no reason. Grand Concubine Fong was amused by this expressionless crown princess. Look at what he said, he was really not courteous at all. The Empress Dowager shamelessly ruined the reputation of the imperial harem, messing around with her grandnephew in broad daylight. The crown prince said with a cold expression, I'm giving her a death sentence for her sake. Old concubine Fong's expression suddenly changed. She lowered her head to look at the Empress Dowager, who was wrapped in a silk robe and shivering. Her eyes showed some worry. She had long advised this old sister not to insist on becoming enemies with the crown prince and crown princess. However, she just didn't listen. Wasn't this a disaster? Even she didn't know what to do next. Chen Chaoji hastily stepped forward and cupped his hands, saying, Your Highness the Crown Prince, Crown Princess. There must be something fishy about this matter. How is it possible for Her Majesty the Empress Dowager? Chen Chaoji's face was pale as he looked at that intoxicated young man who was forced to kneel on the side but still continued to make indecent movements. Chapter 4206. Of course, he recognized this Qin family disciple. But the problem was, no matter how bad the Empress Dowager was, why would she do such a thing with a grandnephew from a side branch? Moreover, it was in broad daylight? Was she that lonely? She must have been wronged. Although Chen Chaoji felt that the Empress Dowager was wronged, he couldn't find any evidence to prove that the Empress Dowager was indeed wronged. Thus, he could only mumble, Your Highness. Your Highness Crown Princess. Mo Lien raised his hand and coldly said, Left Prime Minister, you don't need to quibble for her. This matter concerns the reputation of the royal family. I believe that the Prime Minister must have made a choice. Choice? Chen Chaoji's heart thumped heavily. Empress Dowager Chen knelt there and saw a trace of hesitation and confusion on the face of the Prime Minister's nephew. She couldn't help but angrily shout, No, it's not like what you said. Why aren't you slapping him awake? Slap him awake. Empress Dowager Chen shouted at the two Qin family manservants like a madwoman. When the two Qin family disciples saw this, they wished that they could poke their eyes out and pretend that they didn't see anything. They fearfully took a few steps forward and under the urging of Empress Dowager Chen's cold gaze, they heavily slapped the Chen family's side branch grandnephew's face. The man woke up with a start, only to hear a sharp yell from the front. Chen Qian, tell me honestly, who did you come to the garden to see? Chen Qian's face was blank and he hurriedly said the words that he had already silently repeated hundreds of times. This lowly one is here to see the Crown Princess. The Crown Princess arranged for this lowly one to meet here, Arbor sneered. Empress Dowager Chen hurriedly crawled forward and glared at Mo Lien with a twisted face. Did you hear that? Listen. Mo Lien ruthlessly kicked her to the ground, causing her to spit out a mouthful of blood with a wah. Empress Dowager Chen's expression changed. She didn't expect that Mo Lien wouldn't care about her face at all. The little Crown Princess glanced at Chen Qian, who was trembling on the ground, with a look of disdain. Then she threw herself into Mo Lien's arms. The latter naturally reached out and hugged her, raising his hand to caress the back of her head. Arbor turned his little head and stared at Empress Dowager Chen as if he was looking at a corpse. After a while, he said sarcastically, You're crazy. I'm not as crazy as the Empress Dowager, who would come to an unfamiliar giant pain mansion for a rendezvous for no reason. Furthermore, the Empress Dowager wants to frame this Crown Princess. Can you please find a more decent man? The little Crown Princess did not hide the disdain on her face. She raised her head and reached out to grab Mo Lien's chin. She lifted it up slightly and turned to look at the Empress Dowager sarcastically. Am I crazy? I don't want my husband, who is like a flower, and I want this broken thing beside you? The flower-like husband silently lowered his eyes, blinked, and glanced at his little wife. It's you, Empress Dowager. You're already so old. You've been buried deep in the palace all day, so you've already withered. That's why you're so desperate and can pull in any kind of ghost for nourishment. Chen Chaoji trembled. He felt that the little crown princess's words were extremely vicious, but he couldn't find any words to refute it. How did the Chen family produce a woman like you? The little crown princess said in a cold voice, a cold light flashing in her eyes. Unwilling to be left out, so shameless. What are you guys still standing there for? Send her on her way. Oh no. I want to see who dares to stop me. Chapter 4207. The little stoic shouted coldly, and her chilly gaze circled around before landing on Grand Consort Fong's face. Grand Consort Fong only felt her body tremble slightly, and she hastily blocked Queen Dowager Chen with her arms. She earnestly advised, Crown Princess, the Queen Dowager is indeed in the wrong in this matter. But, she's an old person in the palace after all. It's inevitable that she'll be a bit muddle-headed when she gets older. She didn't think things through and went into a dead end. What nonsense. Arbor coldly gazed at Grand Consort Fong and rudely interrupted her. Even if the Heavenly Emperor came today, he wouldn't be able to save her. Do it. Ao, Yi simply brought 2 royal guards and personally went forward to twist the white silk. Earlier on, the 2 broken pieces of white silk had been thrown onto the ground by him. Now, he had taken out a new piece of it. As expected, Aya's inner world was filled with quite a few pieces of white silk. Chen Chaoji hastily knelt down and kowtowed loudly in front of Prince and, Your Highness the Crown Prince, please quell your anger. Please forgive today's matter on account of the former emperor, on account of my Chen family. It's no use looking at anyone. Crown Prince Mo coldly interrupted Chen Chaoji's words as he gazed at the people behind him with a serene gaze. Prime Minister Zhua, you brought so many people here today to see such a lively royal scandal. Do you think we should let you all leave like this? Chen Chaoji felt chills all over his body. The group of Chen clan servants behind him were frightened to the point they rolled on the ground, and they repeatedly kowtowed and begged for mercy. They mumbled a mess of, your servant didn't see anything, and your servant won't say anything. However, Mo Lian's extremely chilly gaze landed on them, as if she was looking at a group of corpses. The Prince of Giant Pain and his son continued to cower on the side, not daring to utter a single word. It wasn't that they were cowardly and afraid of trouble. Their Prince of Giant Pain's estate was truly innocent in this matter. Yet the Queen Dowager insisted on tearing apart the Crown Princess at the Prince of Giant Pain's estate. With the Crown Princess's temper, it was already very polite of her not to behead this old witch on the spot. Now, for the sake of the imperial family, the Chen family should be secretly happy that the Empress Dowager's corpse was left intact. If they continued to cause a ruckus, the Crown Prince, who was soft-hearted, sick, and crazy, would annihilate the entire Chen family. What couldn't he do? He was angry because of a beauty. He was just like his father. Stay up late, grabbed one end of the white silk and worked with another guard to tighten it. The Empress Dowager's hands desperately clutched the satin around her neck. She stared at Prince Mo and the little Crown Princess in horror. Her throat made a gurgling sound, and the light in her eyes dimmed bit by bit. Arbor stared at her coldly without any change in his expression. Old concubine Fong was stopped by 2 guards on one side. She couldn't rush over at all. She could only scream at the top of her lungs, No, no. Her gaze landed on the young Crown Prince Consort's stern face. For some reason, she couldn't help but shudder when she saw this expression. The 2 personal guards behind old concubine Fong were naturally stopped by the Crown Prince's people. Just now, they were caught off guard and the white silk was broken. The people of the Night Pavilion were very angry. Naturally, they wouldn't let them go forward to destroy it. Empress Dowager, Empress Dowager. Old concubine Fong cried bitterly. This appearance, the little Crown Princess's faint eyes couldn't help but glance at old concubine Fong's face. In the depths of the palace, was there such a friendship? This old concubine Fong was a good person who valued friendship and righteousness. Chapter 4208. Empress Dowager Chen's head drooped heavily and was placed to the side. Aoyi stepped forward to report. Reporting to Your Highness, the Crown Princess and Empress Dowager Chen have been dealt with. Chen Chaoji's entire body couldn't help but tremble slightly, as if this was the first time he had seen this pair of demonic stars. He cast a fearful glance in the direction of the Crown Prince. Prince Simo only glanced at him coldly and then said, "Left Prime Minister." Left Prime Minister Chen Chaoji immediately knelt on the ground in fear and said repeatedly, "Your Highness, this subject didn't see anything today. This subject can swear a blood oath with these servants that we won't dare to say a word about Her Highness the Empress Dowager." Mo Lien looked at him indifferently and said, "Left Prime Minister." Yes, old subject is here. This prince sees that your health hasn't been good recently and you look old. Such a troublesome thing has happened at home. If you really can't do it, you can try your best to ask Imperial Father to remove you from your post and retire early. Wouldn't that be wonderful? Mo Lien's gaze was indifferent as he spoke, without the slightest ripple. But in Qin Chaoji's ears, it was no less than a shocking wave. So, the Crown Prince was forcing him to resign on his own accord? The Crown Prince's meaning couldn't be more obvious. If you leave by yourself now, you can still get a good reputation and retire well in your hometown. If this prince makes a move, Chen Chaoji's snot and tears flowed freely. His heart felt as bitter as if he had swallowed coptis. He hurriedly knelt and said, "This subject will consider it carefully." Prince Mo nodded indifferently and then didn't look at him anymore. Grand Concubine Fong was still silently crying beside Her Highness the Empress Dowager's corpse. Prince Mo glanced at her and said indifferently, "Her Highness the Empress Dowager is unrestrained and unethical. She can't enter the imperial mausoleum of Mount Heaven Saint. As for her funeral, Grand Concubine can think about it." After saying that, he took his wife's small hand and turned around to walk out. Grand Concubine Fong felt as if she had been struck by lightning. She was so angry that she couldn't help but sway. "Your Highness the Crown Prince, death is like an extinguished lamp. Even if the Empress Dowager and the Crown Princess had many grudges before, now that she is dead, shouldn't she enjoy the glory that belongs to her?" Mo Lien abruptly turned her head, her phoenix eyes revealing a terrifying storm. Old Concubine Fong was startled by his deep and terrifying gaze. She couldn't help but take 2 steps back. "If it wasn't for the sake of the royal family's reputation, I wouldn't have done it. Today, we should cut her into 1,000 pieces." Mo Lien roared angrily. "Now that we've left her with an intact corpse, what's there to be dissatisfied about? What was this old witch trying to do? He wanted to completely destroy his Jojo. Was there really such a disgusting woman in the world? There was no deep hatred between the two of them, so why did they have to do such a disgusting thing?" Old Concubine Fong was frightened by the Crown Prince's ferocious appearance. She took a few steps back and stammered, Your Highness? You don't know what's good for you." Mo Lien said angrily, "Come, throw this evil woman out of the imperial city and burn her." Old Concubine Fong was so scared that she couldn't help but fall to the ground. She reacted in a second and hurriedly begged for mercy. "Your Highness, you can't do this, you can't." Mo Lien didn't listen to her and threw a glance at Aoyi. Yi immediately took the order and led his men forward. They wrapped the old woman's corpse in a white silk cloth, jumped up the eaves, and disappeared without a trace. Old Concubine Fong couldn't help but burst into tears. She seemed to be caught unprepared. Chapter 4209. As for Chen Qianhe, that lass, who was kneeling on the side, she was already trembling all over in fright. How would she dare to utter a single word? "Your Highness, how should we deal with the 2 of them?" When Chen Qianhe heard someone mention them, he hurriedly waved his hands and shouted, "It has nothing to do with me, nothing to do with me. It was Her Highness the Empress Dowager who summoned me here, saying that there's something good for me to take advantage of. How would he have known that this good thing would suddenly become a fatal disaster?" Mo Lien scoffed coldly. She had never seen such a brainless person. He didn't even consider that Empress Dowager Chen had him come over to slander the Crown Princess. Whether this matter succeeded or not, it didn't seem to benefit him. He only had himself to blame. Since he was willing to board Empress Dowager Chen's lousy ship today, he was certain that he would lose his life. Mo Lien didn't feel like wasting any more words with him. She directly waved her hand and said, "Doesn't Imperial Father have a barrel of bliss? Throw it in." "What barrel of bliss?" Chen Qianhe's face instantly paled in fright, scrambling to crawl in Qin Chaoji's direction. Uncle, save me." Qin Chaoji's old face darkened as he glared at him. When he saw him pouncing over, he dodged to the side without hesitation. The Chen family could be considered to have been destroyed in their hands. Save him? Right now, he hated that he couldn't eat his flesh and bones, so how could he save him? After that last Qin Qianhe was dragged away, Chen Chaoji's expression darkened as he was also taken away by the Night Pavilion to sign the Heavenly Dao Blood Oath. Mo Lien pulled his wife's small hand and turned to the King of Jianping and his son, who were still pretending to be quails. "King of Jianping." Here. The old King of Jianping hurriedly came before the young couple and smiled apologetically. "Crown Prince, don't worry. No one in my King of Jianping estate dares to say a word about today's matter." In reality, the servants of the King of Jianping estate had already been dispersed by him. Other than him, Kuan, and a few personal guards, there really wasn't anyone else who saw this farce. What kind of joke was this, the old King of Jianping thought. He clearly knew that the Empress Dowager Jianping was tearing the Crown Princess apart in her estate. How could he be so stupid as to let people come and watch? What good could come out of watching? According to his past experience, none of the people who surrounded the pair of ominous stars would have a good ending. For example, Qin Chaoji today. The old King of Jianping chuckled with a brilliant smile on his face. "Crown Prince, you can rest assured. Leave the matters here to me." The Crown Prince of Jianping, Mo Kuan, couldn't help but cover his face. He always felt that the flattering smile on his old father's face was very painful to the eyes. Mo Lien nodded and did not say anything more to King Jianping. He pulled his wife towards the entrance of King Jianping's mansion. The old King of Jianping and his son sent the young couple off all the way to the door. The joyful smile on their faces could not be concealed. "Get the hell out of here." The young Crown Princess read these words from the old King of Jianping's eyes and looked at him expressionlessly. "King Jianping, I see that the purple jade ink orchid in your courtyard is not bad." The old King of Jianping's heart thumped heavily, and he hurriedly revealed an innocent old face. Not at all. Crown Princess, the exotic flowers and herbs in my estate are not even half as many as in Prince Kang's estate." "Oh." The old King of Jianping's eyes twitched. He turned around and said, "Come, hurry and bring the purple jade ink orchid out for the Crown Princess." Not long after, a servant hurriedly brought over a pot of purple jade ink orchid. The young Crown Princess reached out to hug the flower pot and expressionlessly looked at the old King of Jianping. Chapter 42:10. She casually tossed 2 storage talismans to the old Prince of Jianping. A gift in return. She wasn't taking his precious flowers for free, she was exchanging them for something else. The old Prince of Jianping was taken aback. He stared blankly at the back of the little Crown Princess as she boarded the carriage. He was already mentally prepared to be robbed by the bandit Crown Princess. Why was it so strange today? Dad. Mo Kuan reached out excitedly. "I heard that the storage talismans drawn by the Crown Princess are extremely spacious and can store living things. Give me one." The old Prince of Jianping casually stuffed the 2 storage talismans into his pocket before turning to leave. Mo Kuan. Was he his biological father? Arbor looked at the pot of flowers for a while before suddenly turning to hand it to Mo Lien. "For you." Ji Chen, who was currently leaning against a corner of the carriage and drinking wine, nearly spat out her wine when she saw this. She teased, "Yo, my flower-like husband." Arbor nodded his small head. "Yes." Ji Chen couldn't resist bursting into laughter. Mo Lien also patted her head in amusement before taking the pot of flowers and putting it away in her inner world. "Jojo, you're so nice." Arbor's eyes curved as he grabbed his hand and asked, Will that woman's matter cause you trouble? What trouble can there be? Prince Mo harumphed. At most, he would be dragged to the emperor's study and reprimanded. She was already dead. If she became that old woman, would the emperor fly into a rage out of humiliation and hang his biological son up to give him a beating? An hour later, at the emperor's study, Prince Mo dashed out and hastily threw himself behind by Wuxia. The White Queen hastily shielded her child and glared at Mo Lushing, who ran out of the study with a whip. She asked vigilantly, "What are you doing?" "Royal father is going to beat husband." The little stoic angrily pushed Mo Lien behind her, glaring at Mo Lushing with a shared hatred for a common enemy with the White Queen. Mo Lushing, this damned brat, was getting more and more promising. He was wondering why he had obediently come here to receive his punishment today. It turned out that he had asked his wife to go and get reinforcements. The Empress Dowager did such a shameless thing. "Why did you hit your son?" Empress Bai said angrily. "It wasn't your son who asked her to do it." Mo Lusheng looked at his wife speechlessly and pointed at Mo Lien and Arbor. It would be strange if this matter had nothing to do with them. No matter how desperate the Empress Dowager was, it was impossible for her to go to Giant Pain Mansion and do such a thing in broad daylight. Arbor said angrily, "Mother, Imperial Father is being unreasonable. This matter clearly has nothing to do with my husband." That's right. The White Empress protected her son and glared at Mo Lushing in annoyance. "Don't bother my son with such nonsense in the future. They didn't have eyes, yet they insisted on provoking us. They deserve to die." The Empress snorted. She had long sent people to Giant Pain Mansion to investigate this matter in detail, so how could there be anything she didn't know? The Empress Dowager was in the wrong, but the two of them actually scared Grand Consort Fong into falling ill. The White Empress was taken aback and then snorted. It must be because she couldn't take the scare. The young couple nodded at the same time, expressing their great agreement with their mother's words. The emperor was instantly angered into laughter. Just as he was about to roar at this pair of treasures, he suddenly saw a eunuch hurrying over and repeatedly kneeling. "Your Majesty, Your Majesty! Lord Preceptor of the State has sent an urgent report." "What happened?" The emperor took the letter the eunuch presented and opened it to read. His expression changed slightly. Chapter 42:11. Prince Mo poked his head out from behind the White Queen and glanced at the letter in his father's hand. What kind of message could that state preceptor send back? He was probably thinking about his wife again, right? "What is it?" The queen glanced suspiciously at the letter in Mo Lushing's hand. Mo Lushing didn't hide it from her and directly handed the letter over. Bai Wuxia swept a glance over it and harumphed. Truly absurd. Since the Sea of Forgetfulness's dragon clan wants to see their daughter-in-law, why didn't they come to receive her themselves? They actually detained the state preceptor now and even sent a letter to threaten him? What does this mean? Arbor was startled and looked at the letter in the White Queen's hand. The queen turned and handed the letter to Arbor. "Jojo, just take a look. You don't need to pay attention to this. What hasn't the state preceptor seen before? How could he be detained so easily this time?" Seeing that his wife was suspicious, Mo Lushing couldn't help but defend the state preceptor. After all, he's in the sea. No matter how capable the state preceptor is, it's probably hard to deal with some things in the sea. Besides, the dragon clan has many clansmen, and the state preceptor only brought several dozen people on this trip. If the other party insists on detaining them, there's nothing we can do. Bai Wuxia harumphed. "In short, my daughter-in-law isn't going anywhere. She has to rush over just because the Sea of Forgetfulness's dragon clan wants to see her? What kind of logic is that?" Mo Lien nodded, very much agreeing with her mother's words. "If they want to see my wife, then let them send someone to invite her themselves." Not only did they have to invite her, they had to invite her loudly and announce it to the whole world. His chow wasn't a little stray cat on the roadside that anyone could pick up and bring home. Mo Lusheng speechlessly looked at his wife and son's identical disdainful expression and face-bombed. "All right, then send a letter back to them and let the Dragon Clan's clansmen consider it themselves." The crown prince nodded and pulled his wifey's hand over. He lowered his head to glance at the little stoic. Jojo, if you don't want to go, no one can force you. Xiao Mu raised her head to look at him, her lips curling up as she replied in a gentle voice, I know. Bai Wuxia chuckled and pulled the child with one hand and his daughter-in-law with the other. Little Tang Yuan's wife, it's about time. Let the three of us go and have a meal. Mo Lusheng hurriedly took a few steps forward and called out aggrievedly, Wu Xia. Mo Lien smiled. Mother, what about father? Your father? He's busy with government affairs. Let him eat by himself. Wife. Mo Lusheng raised his feet and followed. How could he be willing to fall behind? He was wrong, okay? I won't hit my son next time. At the very least, he had to find a time when Wu Xia wasn't around to beat up that little bastard. Otherwise, wouldn't he be asking for trouble? Bai Wuxia pursed her lips in amusement and winked at her son, silently implying, Son, don't be afraid. Look at how obedient your father is in your mother's hands. Mo Lien's phoenix eyes curved slightly, and she nodded with a smile. The family of four chased each other to the dining hall and had a rather sumptuous meal. Afterwards, the crown prince followed the emperor to the study to discuss matters. Queen Bai pulled her daughter-in-law to chat about their matters in the lower star domain. When the crown prince came to pick them up later, he looked at his mother's smiling face and asked curiously, Mother, how was your chat with Jojo? It was very good. Queen Bai didn't understand why her son asked this. Chapter 42:12. Mo Lien couldn't help but want to laugh. He suppressed his smile and tugged at his wifey's hand. Jojo, what were you talking about with Mother this afternoon? We were talking about you. Arbor's eyes sparkled as she said, You were so cute when you were young. It couldn't be, weren't they just chatting? Could it be that Mother was the only one chatting? Mother told him everything that happened before he was 3 years old? Mo Lien instantly felt unwell. What good things could happen before he was 3 years old? Wasn't it eating, drinking, and pooping everywhere? Pooey. Mo Lien pulled his wifey and fled from Mother's place. He pinched his wifey's little face. Jojo, forget everything Mother said before. That won't do. Xiao Mu hugged him and climbed up his waist. I've remembered everything that royal mother told me. I didn't expect you to be so fun when you were young. No wonder people call you little glutinous dumpling. Mo Lien, where was his authority? The next day, Arbor went to the star region to visit Duanmuqing. Her expression was especially serious. Qi Xianxian saw that she pursed her lips and didn't say anything. Her heart couldn't help but beat wildly. Jojo, is it especially serious? Xiao Mu's small stoic face was taut. She abruptly flipped her wrist, and a glistening green fruit with small hairs on it appeared in her palm. The fruit was only half the size of a palm. It looked sparkling and translucent, and a strange fragrance wafted over. When Qi Xianxian smelled the aroma, her saliva almost dripped out. Her eyes widened as she said, Look, it looks delicious. Little Fatty's mouth twitched, and he reached out to tug at her. Why was this child so easily tempted by good food? Jojo, what is this? Lu Yu, Jiang Shaoxin, Ma Ta and the rest also surrounded her and looked curiously at the fruit in her hand. Holy fruit, Arbor said expressionlessly, his large eyes glaring fiercely at Duanmuqing. Duanmuqing smiled bitterly and nodded at her. I was too presumptuous. I still have to ask Jojo first. Qi Xianxian hurriedly nodded. It's good that you admit your mistake. Jojo, is this the fruit of the little tree? Mata asked with a smile. Arbor nodded and threw the fruit into Duanmuqing's hands. Fortunately, the second sacred fruit that the small tree bore had already taken shape in the divine territory. Otherwise, Duanmuqian would have to use the medicinal power to control his wounds and wait for a while. Now, there were 4 or 5 small fruits hanging on the branches of the little tree. It seemed that as long as the star field was filled with divine power, it would not be a problem to obtain more saint fruits in the future. If a god domain was transformed into a saint domain, perhaps the holy fruits could be endless as well? Perhaps she could first feed the little tree with the holy stone, or is that the venerable peach blossom immortal and the others had excavated? While Arbor was deep in thought, Duanmuqing had already eaten the sacred fruit. Everyone looked at him eagerly and could not help but ask, "How do you feel? Is it delicious?" Qi Xuanxuan's question made everyone laugh. This child only cared about whether it was delicious or not. How much was she drooling? Duanmuqing slowly raised his hand. Everyone could clearly see that the rotting wound on his wrist was gradually disappearing in a matter of seconds. Little Fatty exclaimed happily, "Quick, look at the wound. This sacred fruit is really magical." Duanmuqing was also rather excited. Chapter 42:13. She hurriedly looked up at Arbor and called out softly, "Jojo." Arbor nodded. "I'll get Little Tree to send you to the island. Focus on your advancement and don't think about anything else." Duanmuqing nodded and disappeared in front of them. Qi Xianxian giggled and said, "Jojo, Duanmu ate the holy fruit. Can he still advance?" Arbor thought for a moment and said softly, "If there are no accidents, he should be able to break through to the godly state." Everyone's eyes widened, revealing a shocked expression. Was the holy fruit so effective? Duanmuqing could break through to the godly state with just one holy fruit? Does that mean Duanmuqing will soon enter the 5 spirits reincarnation? Arbor grunted. When he finishes advancing, we'll send him out of the star sector. The 5 spirits reincarnation should not be a big problem for Duanmuqing. As long as he entered the godly state and stabilized his cultivation, the 5 spirits reincarnation was just a formality. Everyone chatted for a while more before Arbor sent them off to play. When she left the star sector, she saw Prince Emo step through the door and smile at her. "Jojo, Father received a message from the Sea of Forgetfulness's dragon clan early this morning." With that, he handed a jade talisman to Arbor. Arbor touched the jade talisman and saw a message on it. "To the Emperor of the Divine Prefecture, the Dragon Clan has sent people to the Divine Prefecture's imperial capital, Dragon Flame City. The transportation talisman array will arrive in a few days. We'll talk then." Arbor raised his eyebrows and said non-committally, "Oh." His attitude was cold, as if it had nothing to do with him whether they came or not. Emo Lien knew that she had a knot in her heart about the Dragon Clan. He patted her head and said softly, "Let's listen to what they have to say." Arbor glanced at him. "We have nothing to do today. Let's go to the hot spring at Half Moon Cliff's splendid villa." "Sure." Emo Lien nodded and smiled. "Your Highness." Xiao Yi jumped in from outside the high wall and said with a gloomy expression, "Something happened, Your Highness." Emo Lien raised her eyebrows slightly. "What happened?" "Your Highness." Xiao Yi cupped his hands and said, "The people of Medicine King Island are carrying Sir Hewen's corpse and making a ruckus at the entrance of the palace. She's clamoring to find the crown princess and pay with her life." Arbor was taken aback. Sir Hewen passed away? What was going on? When they parted ways in Jiaowei City, Hewen and Ni Hanji were still fine. Why did Sir Hewen die in less than 2 days? Emo Lien also frowned. "What's going on? I've already sent people to investigate, but I haven't found out the details yet." Xiao Yi said, "Your Highness, we can't let them make a ruckus outside the palace gate. Should we chase them away?" Emo Lien sneered. "One of their own is dead. Why are they looking for my crown princess? Let's go and take a look." Arbor looked puzzled. Sir Hewen had died inexplicably, and the people of Medicine King Island were looking for her. No matter how she looked at it, there was something fishy about this matter. Hewen's personality had always been peaceful and he treated people very well. Arbor also couldn't figure out who would have wronged him. Emo Lien lowered her head and glanced at her. "You don't have to care about these things. I'm fine." Arbor raised her hand and shook Missouri Lien's hand. She also had doubts in her heart, so she naturally wanted to go out and see what was going on. Moreover, the people of Medicine King Island had already come to pick on her. If she shrank back and didn't accept the challenge, wouldn't it make people think that she had a guilty conscience and didn't dare to meet people? What a joke. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.